Just gonna check that that's actually going. Awesome. How you guys doing today? I went and got my second dose today, and so I can already feel it messing with my arm. I can already feel it messing with me. So I think today is going to be a pretty weird stream, but let's get into that after we get into... We're streaming away. We're streaming away. I hope you're doing well. There's so many streams for us to see, but this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're well. Now come on and join me. Watch the world go to hell because we're streaming away. We're streaming today. Let's stream. Let's stream today. You got right in there, DM. I saw it. Your message came up, and then Misty's message came up like right after. So it was like snap, snap. Today's stream, I actually have a bit of a special treat today. I have an interview lined up for 8 o'clock, which is why I'm using the Zoom. Hey, Crouching, how you doing? I'm using the Zoom webcam today just to check in. You guys can see me, right? Like everything's fine. I don't need to muck about with any of this. So that when the person comes in at 8, they'll be able to just connect in, and it'll be able to, hopefully, cross those fingers, be a seamless transition. I've got somebody coming in. It is a self-proclaimed anarchist, somebody who's actually taking to the streets and confronting alt-right groups as they are trying to, organize and pressure, especially restaurants here in Toronto. So we're going to have a nice conversation. I talked to them earlier. I'm actually a bit bummed because I talked to them I went on September 6th. There was a Labor Day organization from Socialist Action. And I went and I recorded much of it and came back, and I was just going to work on it today to get a video made. And then all of the video data got corrupted. So I got to look into why that happened and how that occurred, and I lost all the video. Like I'm really, really quite bummed about it, actually. I lost all that video of a really great event. So, but fortunately, they were able to take their own video. Maybe I'll request to see if I can get some over here so I can show you guys what's been going on the streets. And it was a very successful sort of a moment. So, all right. Already Crouching, moving on to the number pick. Going with an 8. If anybody else wants to pick, now's your chance. I'm going to go with a 2. I'm with you, Crouching. I've never won this
Here
thing.
we go for
Never
today's
happened.
number. It's
Come on,
September 8, 2021.
What did I say? I said a 2? I'll stick with
10 balls. Each ball has a
Missy
number.
with a 4.
Numbers 1 through 10.
Are you in on this, DM? Are you gonna guess?
Numbers.
Let's see what we got. Swirl.
Pick a number.
He didn't say swirl the numbers. What the hell, Mr. Lynch? What the hell? Hey, Vince, how you doing?
Today's number is 8.
It's your lucky day, Crouching. Look at you. What will tomorrow's number be? Vince, you're watching the University Rosedale debate. That's the debate for the riding of University Rosedale, I take it? Yeah, so now's your time, Crouching. Today's your lucky day. Off you go. Go buy a ticket or something. Speaking of, let's just dive into the standard politics. As always, seat projection basically hasn't really moved, right? Wiggle up, wiggle down. Nothing substantial, nothing big. Starting to see articles now that are talking more seriously about the catastrophe that is this election for Mr. Trudeau. that it could be literally the end of his political career, right? That it certainly has the threat to be the end of his prime ministership, certainly. And now we are starting to see articles such as "What O'Toole Isn't Telling You, Conservative Healthcare Promises Made to Be Broken." People pointing out that O'Toole seems to be just saying whatever needs to be said in front of the people he's talking to at the moment. That he's not exactly taking concrete or hard positions. Hey Ruth, how you doing? Again, though, I do think that the debates matter. I think that over the last few elections, the debates have been a moment when a party can gain and lose ground. And the unfortunate truth of this particular election is that many Canadians don't see the NDP as a viable option for reasons that are outside of, let's say, political norms. It's not based on policy issues. And so that's made it a very difficult sort of situation. And of course, as I've reported all the time on this channel, the media is not reporting on the white supremacist movements that exist in Canada. I had a conversation recently with someone who was trying to tell me that the Proud Boys are not a white supremacist organization, that kind of a thing. I think that that is completely endemic of the fact that our media is being very, very quiet about it, and is actually getting to the point now where we can say pretty closely that they are covering for these white supremacists, right? PPC is climbing in the polls, exactly. They might just get a seat, which I think if that's the outcome of this election, that the PPC actually ends up getting a seat, that's reason enough for Justin Trudeau to resign, right? Like, there are countries where there are rising fascist sentiments. There are countries being taken over by fascist parties. It is a phenomenon that is happening that the Western media seems completely disinterested in actually talking about. That you have to go to outlets like RT, and I might show this documentary in full based on how I feel, because I just went and got a second dose of COVID, and it's already, I can tell, it's gotten me quite... Ooh. Ruth, you're saying the Libs haven't pushed if you vote the NDP line a lot yet. I mean, I think that Justin Trudeau is kind of throwing in the towel, honestly. I gotta be straight. Like, I haven't really had the pleasure of seeing him in full form yet, because all of the debates that they've been doing have been French debates. But most people say coming out of those debates he looks good, right? Which makes sense. Like, he was raised in Montreal, so he's a native speaker to the language of French in the first place, so he probably feels the most comfortable. It is sort of his home province, and so he likely comes... That likely translates, right? It likely is quite good. I am with you on this, DM. I mean, like, it's not as though Justin Trudeau has a particular vision for Canada, right? It's not as though he actually has, hey, Tudes, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a bit. It's not as though Justin Trudeau has much, has big ideas, right? It's not like I see it's not like his dad. Like, his dad had very clear, obvious ideas that he wanted to move forward on, right? Like, and important stuff too. Like, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is an important document that you can thank Pierre Elliott Trudeau for, right? Like, that's like a no-nonsense kind of, like, anybody who wants to stand up and critique Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and he can be critiqued. Like, I'm not saying that he was a perfect man or anything. But you do have to confront the reality that this is the man who really spearheaded the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for Canadians. The universal healthcare system ends up being a liberal platform, right? Because I think Pierre Elliott Trudeau saw the writing on the wall with that if he didn't actually do it. What did the Libs really do besides legalize weed? Right? I mean, maybe CERB too, but CERB is well within international norms, right? It's what everybody did. Like, literally only the United States didn't do it. Everybody else did it. So that's not some kind of special thing, right? If anything, you could call it an emergency measure, but everybody did it. And the thing that's really marred Trudeau's passing of the CERB is that he's done everything he can to dismantle it. And there's every indication that they are going to dismantle it instead of doing what should be done, which is to transition it to a permanent policy, right? Like, you want to solve homelessness, you want to solve issues of poverty, you want to move forward in a socialist way, you want to create a more egalitarian society, you want to recover from the failures of neoliberal capital. Well, one of the core ways to do that is to ensure that everybody just has food and shelter, and it's just done universally, and it's done without concern of who deserves it, right? This manic sort of, oh, they don't deserve it sort of thing that exists. No, I mean, I expected it. I honestly did. I knew that it was going to... When I got the first shot of the vaccine, it made me a bit sick for a couple of days, in fact. No, and of course, I still recommend it, of course. I actually feel like I'm quite the laggard. I'm very far behind on the rest of the society on this one. Like, I was starting to get people kind of raising their eyebrows and being like, are you an anti-vaxxer, John? What's the story? Take 2 Advil, not a bad idea, not a bad idea. So I think what I want to focus on today, I feel, is I do want to read this because the news media is not reporting on the white supremacist movements that exist in Canada. They're doing everything they can to cover white supremacist movements in Canada, and so when any organization actually does any reporting on it, I think it should be read, and I think people should know the information, because it's few and far between the people who are reporting on it. Hey, Bumble Guppy, good to see you, bud. Yeah, I hope so too. And of course, the day that I go and get the second dose is the day that I don't have a good night's sleep and all that kind of stuff. The power went out yesterday. I actually had a beautiful moment where the power went out, and it was sort of around 11, so it was still dark, but well before my bedtime. I'm a bit of a night owl, if you guys know. So I was like lighting candles, and it was actually quite romantic. I was like reading a book. It was actually quite beautiful. Okay, 3 things you need to know about the far-right protests targeting Canadian hospitals and Justin Trudeau's campaign events. Experts say far-right and anti-vaccine protesters are self-organizing online. This is by Press Progress. Experts who monitor extremist groups in the far-right agree recent protests targeting Canadian hospitals and Justin Trudeau's campaign events are not the product of a secret conspiracy, but are instead self-organizing online. In recent weeks, hospitals have been targeted by anti-vaccine protesters, while Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's campaign events have been repeatedly disrupted by small but vocal groups of protesters. The protests have escalated in intensity. Healthcare workers have been physically assaulted and ambulances blocked. Meanwhile, Trudeau and his security detail were pelted with gravel at a campaign stop in London, Ontario. Hey, Aga, how you doing today? The appearance of far-right and anti-vaccine protesters has led some to speculate that the protests are secretly funded or coordinated by partisan groups. Gerald Butts, Trudeau's former chief advisor, took things a step further, suggesting the protesters are conspiring to disrupt Trudeau events in southern Ontario ridings that swing between the Liberals and the Conservatives. From Gerald Butts himself, which, first of all, I do have to say, right? I love that there are people in politics with the last name Butts, don't you? Like, as if we're just supposed to say Butts and not pay any attention. His name is Gerald Butts, or Gerald Butts. Like, it's right there. Butts. It's hilarious. Anyway. It's amazing how these protesters always show up to disrupt Trudeau events in southern Ontario ridings that are LPC-CPC fights. Experts who monitor these groups reject the theory that these are paid protesters. Instead, they point to a simpler but equally troubling explanation. Here are 3 things you need to know. Number 1. Many of the protesters are the same people who have been holding anti-lockdown protests for over a year. Peter Smith, an investigative journalist with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, says that many people organizing and attending protests at hospitals and Trudeau campaign events are the same cast of characters who have been staging anti-lockdown and anti-mask protests since the beginning of the pandemic. Just like the hospital protests last week, the demonstrations outside of Trudeau's campaign stops are largely being attended by the same individuals seen at anti-mask lockdown rallies, Smith told Press Progress. A few prominent anti-lockdown influencers, including Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson and racist Calgary mayoral candidate Kevin J. Johnson, actively promoted the hospital protests, as well as the anti-vaccine group that organized it. Another example, Tommy Dyer, a protester who received national media attention after appearing at an August 29, 2021 Trudeau campaign event, with a sign depicting Trudeau being hung for high treason, is a longtime attendee of anti-lockdown protests against Ontario Premier Doug Ford at Queen's Park and linked to the far-right Yellow Vest movement which preceded it. Dyer can be seen in video footage from Trudeau's campaign event in Cambridge calling a black police officer the N-word. Here, of course, is here's the picture, Trudeau being hung. Number 2, the protesters are a ragtag mix of far-right fringe groups. Another thing experts say is important to understand is that the protesters are a diverse and heterogeneous mix of far-right fringe groups who subscribe to a range of extreme views. The Canadian Anti-Hate Network has identified known white nationalists and numerous individuals affiliated with the People's Party of Canada at a September 6th campaign stop where Trudeau was pelted with gravel. I do want to pause here and say straight out, I'm not going to vote Justin Trudeau. I am not a liberal. I'm not going to support the Liberals, all of this. It is despicable that people are throwing anything at him, let alone gravel. Like, he is still the Prime Minister of our country. There should still be some basic decorum in these things, that if we do believe he is guilty of crimes, there are legal methods that we can and should pursue in order to arrest and prosecute a person if we believe that that is the case. Picking up gravel and throwing it at the Prime Minister of Canada, I hope that that individual or individuals are arrested and tried for assault, because that is what it is. Justin Trudeau, again, I don't agree with his politics. I certainly don't think he is a class ally, but I certainly don't think we should be walking around throwing rocks at the elected leader of our country, right? Lots of angry people, though. You're right about that, DM. On the other hand, one of the biggest channels where protesters self-organize is run by a man who shares COVID-19 conspiracy memes and promoted by a 32-year-old suburban mom who believes vaccinations are being used as a pretext to bring about the segregation of humanity. Complicating things further, the largest group at Trudeau's August 29th campaign event, which was cancelled for security reasons, were pro-vaping activists upset about a proposed tax on vaping flavors. That group's spokesperson is a former People's Party candidate. The great irony here is that as more information is coming out about vaping, vaping is far more dangerous than regular cigarettes. You're better off just smoking regular cigarettes. Big shock. You take a piece of technology that shoves chemicals right into the back of your throat and down into your lungs. It's more dangerous. Ooh, big shocker there. I would be completely fine if vaping was made completely illegal. Forget about taxing it. Forget about any of that kind of stuff. Vaping should not be a part of our society. Just this, and this whole, but my freedom, no. There's all kinds of chemicals and there's all kinds of technologies that we don't allow exist in the public sector for various reasons. Vaping should absolutely be one of them. This is from Luc Lebrun. Some of the protesters that disrupted the Prime Minister's event today had signs from the Tobacco Harm Reduction Association, which bills itself as the Canadian voice for smokers, vapors' rights. Because now smoker is a type of person who's supposed to have rights. Interesting. The organizing we are seeing is the work of dozens or even hundreds of separate online pages channels, group chats, and social media posts, Smith explained, adding that the protesters are coalescing around pandemic and election issues and quickly being disseminated across platforms through common members. There appears to not be a central body or group coordinating the actions. I do think that we should be paying attention to the people who are likely to be central organizers, right? This is Tyler L. Russell. He is the leader of Canada First, which is a white supremacist movement that exists here in Canada. I'm not going to play his stuff, nor do I suggest you go to his YouTube channel and subscribe there, but you can find him. It's very easy to find. This particular video I was listening to was in regards to the Derek Chauvin trial, and he essentially defends Derek Chauvin, right? That is the long and short of it. It's not very nuanced, right? He's very pro-cop for obvious white supremacist reasons. And just on a personal note, this guy has probably about 30 more subscribers than I do. And some of his videos are getting like twice the amount of views that mine do. So on a personal note, I would really love it if I could fuck this guy, just in terms of the raw numbers, right? That would be really wonderful if by the raw numbers, I crushed this man. That would make me feel good about myself. Hey Mark, how you doing, bud? So Mark, just to answer your question quickly, what about vaping? How dangerous is it? So there is, I forget the name of it offhand, and I wish POC was in here. He's really on it. Phrasing, yeah, you got me too. It's my bad. So for vaping, there is a disorder. I'm completely blanking on the name of the disorder that is arising from vaping, where people in their early 20s even are falling prey to this. It's ending up with major hospitalizations, major lung issues that go well beyond anything that we're seeing that comes out of cigarette use, right? So you literally have like a 20-year-old that has the same kind of lungs as like a 50-year-long smoker, right? It's a very very questionable practice that I feel we should have more research done on it. Like I'm not a big proponent of just releasing technologies into the society and allowing the chaotic free market to decide. That's not how I think we should be doing things. That we should actually be talking about things and having discussions and asking ourselves, well, is it worth our while to have this in the society in the first place? But that's not how we do things here in Canada. All right. Back to the article. Number 3, the protesters are self-organizing using a wide range of digital platforms and apps. The Toronto Star recently reported it uncovered a loose network of COVID-19 vaccine and anti-lockdown protesters using that chat app Telegram to share details about the whereabouts of Trudeau's campaign events. Individuals connect with one another online and then organize carpools and set up social activities for in real-life meetups. Once Trudeau's location is known, some group members organize carpools, while others meet up at the events and post live video from the crowd, the Star observed. Afterwards, they celebrate their efforts. From the Toronto Star, the Star has been monitoring a group with more than 500 members, which uses the encrypted messaging app Telegram since Saturday, the morning after dozens of angry protesters prompted Trudeau to cancel a campaign rally in the village of Bolton, Ontario. Protesters targeting hospitals relied on the same communications infrastructure to self-organize and anti-vaccine protests at hospitals last week. Drew, a researcher who has monitored the growth of Canada's anti-lockdown movement over the span of the pandemic, says far-right and anti-vaccine protesters are relying on a variety of apps and digital platforms. The anti-vaccine group Frontline Nurses organized the hospital protests through channels on Instagram, Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, as well as their own website, Drew told Press Progress. They use any platform they can stay on, Drew said. While Facebook offers a wide reach and still plays an important role in helping these groups find and recruit new supporters, they are turning to new platforms because of restrictions Facebook has been imposing on their content. As a result, these groups are increasingly using encrypted chat apps like Telegram or alternative video platforms like BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. And of course, here's just some of the conversation. Video sites are more for spreading ideas and streaming events than organizing, Drew explained, whereas chat apps like Telegram are typically used by small, tightly knit groups. Many of the communications channels now being used to promote protests at hospitals and Trudeau campaign events grew out of anti-lockdown and anti-mask protests. In some cases, the channels go back further to far-right yellow vest protests and campaign against M103, a motion condemning Islamophobia. One thing the Canadian Anti-Hate Network will be monitoring is how these groups and channels continue to evolve after Election Day. The network developed quite organically, Smith said. Even after the current iteration of the conspiracy movement has gone on to another issue, this network will remain. It is worth pointing out that there have been... Yellow Vests is a great point to talk about. That the Yellow Vests in France were extremely effective, and they were a far-right racist organization, but their protests were always along class lines. And so they were actually very effective at altering policy, because they were never going out and protesting along racial lines. They were always going out and protesting along class lines. And so as this organization and as these sort of loose-knit groups start to tighten up and organize, we'll see upon which lines they fall. But given the company that they keep, I think it has a lot of potential to go the direction we don't want it to go. Okay, you guys are saying a lot of stuff. So, Butts is Justin's cue card writer. Yeah, that makes good sense because it does sound like pretty shitty. Butts, shit. I'm a genius. I was saying that I was supposed to get a second dose on Friday, but I put it off because I went for a hike this weekend. Now I have flu-like symptoms. Oh dear. Oh dear, Toods. I don't know where you're living, bud, but there are some places in the United States. But if you were outside mainly, like COVID seems to not do well in the outdoors. Crouching, I'm all for protesting, but when there's violence against health workers and blocking hospitals, it crosses a line. The police should break this up. It's a crazy time to be alive. No different from the U.S. Fringe groups everywhere. Lots of angry people out there. Well, and what's happening in the United States? Like, you take a look at the Portland situation, right? And in Portland, the police forces there are actually not stopping anything that the Proud Boys are doing. That the Proud Boys basically take over the streets, smash places up, right? Assault people, and the police essentially don't show up, won't do anything about it. Which, of course, I mean, creates incentive for a citizen group like Antifa to take to the streets themselves. And so you're ending up with that kind of classic strife that existed on the lead up to, and then, of course, during World War II, right? Between the communists and the fascists. Those lines are being redrawn in our society more and more. And it's more augmented in the United States because the abandonment has been more fierce, right? Here we were able to put in support systems, ensure that people weren't completely disenfranchised, right? And so lots of people who may otherwise have taken to the streets or found these organizations and organized along those lines are happy to just sort of chill out and not be part of because, look, you ensure that people aren't desperate, they don't turn to violence. What? Oh my goodness. What a thought. What a strange thought that seems to be difficult for people to grasp onto, but such is life. The anti-lockdown protests passed by my apartment almost every week from January to April. There were a lot of Christian nationalist vibes, yeah, and several Trump 2020 flags, so this isn't surprising. Well, and the one that exists here in Toronto, the largest protest movement in Toronto today is an anti-protest move, an anti-lockdown protest, an anti-mask protest. And recently, the head, right at the head of a parade that they have, of the march that they have, is a fellow holding a big wooden cross, right? And I'm talking big, it's big wooden cross, right? And he's carrying it the whole time, which, I mean, good for him, in terms of his physical feat of strength. But, it's it's completely shameful to me. Like, I have given these people I actually went to the anti-mask protest and handed out flyers saying, come protest poverty, right? If you guys care about this, like, if you are politically organized and, like, politically of a political mind, come to my protest. None of them did, right? So to me, I take a look at the anti-mask movement here, and right now it is just a kind of a faff, mainly. I think it's just angry dudes who are mad they can't go to Denny's, you know? And, but it has all of the, traits of being an organization that's going to manifest into a far-right movement. Right, and doubly so because, like, while I'm handing it out, right, like, they find out that I'm a communist, and, well, what do? Right? What do you think fascists do when they find out there's a communist in their midst? Ega, you're saying, I'm not so sure in Poland it is customary to throw eggs at politicians who have lied during campaigns and evaded reproach. I mean, I'm not necessarily in favor of that either, honestly. Like, I think that if you want to do violence to your political organizations, that there are ways to do it that are legislative and that work that we have done in the past. That throwing and in the end, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't actually work for the benefit. It doesn't actually do what you want it to do. Like, throwing gravel at Justin Trudeau has only garnered sympathy from the populace, I think. Like, I don't think there are people. I don't think people are going, yeah, fuck them. I think that people are like, no, don't fucking throw gravel at them, dude. Like, come on. And these fringe groups have been out there for years. People now thinking their allies on Facebook are sucking into something that was just waiting to exploit them. Yeah. What about vaping? How dangerous is it? I mean, vaporing e-cigarettes or I don't know enough about the subject to talk about any of that. Like I say, this is something that one of the members of my group really knows a lot about. If Pissed Off Canadian shows up here, I'll start talking to him about it. He knows an awful lot about it. But I just wouldn't be doing it. I just wouldn't be doing it. It's pretty crazy. It's very obvious the doctors in the trial said it was a lack of oxygen on how George died. Why do I have the feeling these people are paid? Yeah, I don't know. They seem paid. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is really important about an article like this, right? Is that Press Progress is the group that is interested in discovering those kinds of connections. That if we are going to find out about any connections between big institutions, the Conservative Party, even the People's Party, right? And paying protesters to actually show up and do something, it's this organization that's going to be the organization that figures that out, right? And so right now they're saying there's no evidence of that. I think it's fine to be speculative of that. I think Press Progress is pretty speculative of some of that, but so far we don't have any evidence. We don't have the paper trail. And I do think it's legitimate to believe that, like, people are pissed. I think people are pissed, and they have a reason to be pissed. And the thing to always remember about these far-right groups, right, is that they don't actually have an understanding as to what's happening to them, right? That's the thing that I really notice when I go out and protest, when I go out and observe these protests, when I talk to people on the streets and all of this, they don't really know anything about the system that they're in. They don't really understand what's happening to them. Like, that's how you end up at, like, a housing protest, and everybody at the housing protest is saying, build more housing, right? And it's like, okay, that's not going to solve the problem. Like, that's straight up, like, not a solution. And if you think it's a solution, you're going to be easy to deceive, right? It's going to be easy to disperse the energy of this movement, because all a politician needs to do is stand up and say, I'll build more housing, like they all have. And everybody goes, oh, they're going to build more housing. So, you know, problem solved. But if you actually have a critique of the society, you actually understand how the structure of the society works, or at least have a working theory of how the society actually works, you realize very quickly, like, they could build 100 million homes. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter at all, right? Because the billionaires have all the money, so they'll just buy up the housing, and you're in the same problem, right? You're still in the dilly of a pickle, right? Nothing has changed. And I see that as well. Like, you go to these anti-mask protests, and not all of them are nutters, right? Not all of them are crazy people. Although I do got to say, every single time I've gone to one of these, they find out that I'm a communist. I'm not exactly a secret about it. I'm not secretive about it. And they always have me go and talk to one of them. They always say, like, this is a guy, we all listen to this guy, you should talk to this guy. And every single time I've done that, it's COVID doesn't exist. It's a globalist conspiracy between an alliance of blah, 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 blah. And it's just nuts, right? The denial that COVID, the statement that says COVID doesn't exist is about as delusional as it can get, right? And it's so easy to refute. Like, it's so simple to refute. Literally go talk to a nurse, like a single nurse that's working on the front line, and you ask them whether or not COVID is real or not. And if you're not going to listen to the people who are on the front lines dealing with COVID as it is happening, then you're not going to listen to anybody. Then you're living in La La Land. You're like, literally, you're living in a space of kind of like mental illness. And I'm not saying that to discard them or to be dismissive or to even be critical of mental illness itself, but I don't know how else to describe it. How else do you describe this phenomenon of, like, literally saying a thing that certainly exists and the experts who are dealing with it on the front line say it exists, and you refuse to listen to them, instead retreating into this fantasy belief that, nope, COVID doesn't exist, it's all a globalist conspiracy. Because China and the United States are well-known allies and work together, right? Right? That China and the United States would certainly agree to attempt to deceive the populace mutually and together, right? Like, and all of the states in the world, in fact. There isn't a single state that is standing up and saying, COVID doesn't exist. This is all just kind of bullshit. It's unanimous. Everybody agrees, including enemies, right? So you're telling me, like, Iran, China, and Russia, the axis of evil, who the United States has been trying to invade and destroy for the last 30, 40 years, if not longer, agrees with its enemies, the United States and NATO, right? That COVID exists and we need to do something about it. How'd they pull that one off, dude? How'd that happen? So it's that, to me, is what's concerning about these movements, because suddenly you have a whole bunch of people taking to the streets who are espousing a doctrine that is a kind of madness. It's got a madness behind it. And I get that people are upset, and I get that people are mad, and I get that there is an anger and a rage that exists in the society. Makes total sense. Makes total sense. But I'm very concerned that this undirected, kind of hysterically delusional rage can be seized upon and redirected into channels that are actually counterintuitive to the benefit of the populace. As we've seen over and over and over and over in the history of Western civilization, right? That we're supposed to be protecting Western civilization, but near as I can tell, the history of Western civilization is a constant devolving into fascism and a destruction, followed by a period of rebuilding, and then another devolving into fascism and destruction, and back round and round and round and round it goes. And as long as the power remains in the hands of the capitalists, they're happy to do that, right? They'll happily galvanize this populace in order to destroy itself. Like, they'll happily do that. And we shouldn't pretend like they're not interested in that. Like, this documentary here. Am I going to just show this? I probably will. So I'm just going to do a quick spoilers that, like, if it hadn't been for the building of the nuclear bomb from the USSR after World War II, the Allies explicitly planned to invade and destroy the USSR, right? They planned to bombard the USSR out of existence, right? And it's like Operation Dropshot. This documentary goes right through it. As Winston Churchill put this all together, the idea that we were just going to destroy the USSR. But then the USSR is like, oh, we got a nuke. And everybody went, ah. Sounds like the maniacs who tried to run Biden's campaign bus off the road in Texas, yeah. I hate how the mainstream media... Hold on. I hate how the mainstream media talking about this instead of wealth inequality and the unhoused. Yeah, exactly. And they'll talk about the gun conversation, right? Interesting how like the classic, like the guns and the abortion issue, right, and all these things get pushed to the forefront by the media every single time. But like even housing has gone away. Remember the first week of the campaign was all about the housing crisis, and now it's just gone, right? And it's gone because, all the candidates stood up and said what they would say about it, and now Canadians need to decide, and nobody in the mainstream media stood up and said none of that is a solution. It just hasn't been taken seriously. Like, okay, Trudeau got hit with rocks. I honestly don't care. He's a multimillionaire and he can pay for anything he needs. 99% of Canadians cannot. Yellow Vest campaigns, it's not that they campaigned against neoliberalism, but my understanding of the Yellow Vests is that they were essentially a union group, right? Anyway, I'm sure there's a lot more complexity to it that I'm certainly missing, Vince, for sure. And if you would like to show me a source, a documentary would be really great, actually, about the Yellow Vests. That'd be interesting to see. I wouldn't say the Yellow Vests started off as a far-right movement. That happened mainly after a few weeks when a momentum gained problem on people. Holy cow, guys. I'm losing it. I'm losing the thread. Again, I love it when chat starts to push back on me because it gives me the opportunity to learn that my perception may be incorrect about the Yellow Vests. Only need a few that are paid. That's a good point, Bumbleguppy, right? You only need like a few central organizers. Ruth, I think all this protesting, especially with parents and kids as well, having no fear about the safety will be a major detriment. If anyone gets injured, it will be a problem. And, Adam Something did a brand new video on Anarcho Capitalism. His vids bring memes. Toy Store John, I've got the 2 jabs and the booster. Good for you. Good for you. Get ahead of it. Not like me. I'm sitting here being like, ooh, I'm such a laggard, man. I'm such a laggard. The Adams, okay, we got a seconder for the Adam Something. What about the people in anti-mass protests who say, according to CDC studies, COVID mostly affects the elderly? I mean, most diseases would affect the elderly and those with compromised immune systems, right? That just seems like, I don't really understand, Mark, why that would even be a talking point, because like, wouldn't that be the case generally? Okay. You guys are on about this Adam Something. Anarcho Capitalism in practice. Let's go.
My recent video, The Fatal Flaw of Free Market Capitalism, has generated a healthy amount of discussion, in some circles anyway, and so this led me to performing a bunch of thought experiments, which were super fun, and so this video is the result. And just as a quick refresher, anarcho-capitalism is a stateless society where individuals are free to contract with each other and everything else is up to the free market. All the public services are privatized. And I was rather curious as to how this would work in real life. Now, one thing that NCAPs like to bring up to help support the viability of their ideology is the so-called Icelandic Commonwealth, which was, for all intents and purposes, a proto-NCAP society in the Middle Ages. Now, it did manage to exist from 930 until 1262/63, when the Icelanders apparently voted to ask the King of Norway to take over their country. And to quote from the Icelandic Commonwealth's Wikipedia page from the Decline and Fall section, in the early 13th century, the age of the Sturlungs, the Commonwealth began to suffer from chaos and division resulting from internal disputes. Originally, the Godar chieftains functioned more as a contractual relationship than a fixed geographic chieftaincy. However, by 1220, this form of communal leadership was replaced by dominant regional individuals who battled with one another for more control. One historian argues that the chaos and violence of this period stem from an imbalance of power and changes in the nature of Icelandic warfare.
Look, I just don't understand how anybody, like, how can you not see very clearly that this idea of anarcho-capitalism is essentially neo-feudalism? That, like, you are going to have petty warlords that come up and build like a petty hierarchy, and it's going to be based on states and municipalities and all this kind of stuff. Like you're arguing for neo-feudalism. I don't know how you can't see that that's not what you're arguing for when you're arguing for anarcho capitalism. I'm gonna just came in. Can I ask about the vaccine? Of course you can, Ian. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. We're going through this video now, but if you stick around, I'll be sure to touch base with you, bud.
Whereas the number of Godar had been at least 39 in the early Icelandic Commonwealth, a few powerful families had consolidated control over most of the Godar in the late 12th century. Now, I don't know about you, but this to me sounds awfully familiar. And my favorite part about this is that the Icelandic Commonwealth failed so hard in the end that people ended up inviting a foreign despot to invade their land because even that was preferable to living in Icelandic Ancapistan.
Cool map though, eh? I gotta point that out. Like, look at this fucking map. This is sweet. I love maps, man. I just love them.
Now, this was in part a result of the King of Norway exerting pressure on Iceland for a longer time, so some might say that this is cheating and thus isn't fair criticism. But this line of thinking leaves us with three possible options as to why Icecapistan fell. Number one would be because of the Nordic invasion, number two because people were manipulated into voting for the takeover, and number three because people misjudged the situation and made their own call at the ballot box. And I have bad news for ANCAPs. All these options prove my point. They show you that an ANCAP society would either fall victim to a state's well-organized invasion force, or get subverted by propaganda, or people will vote on a feels over reals basis and end up screwing themselves over. Brexit. And I personally think that if a country would transition into the ANCAP model somewhere, a military intervention scenario would be its most likely end. And it would be super convenient too. I mean, there would be no state to declare war on. There is no state. You just roll in with the tanks and announce martial law. Even if some people would resist, it would just be a handful of loosely coordinated militias, if that, against a regular army. And of course, if you have some kind of very powerful high-tech military hardware, you need a very complicated logistics chain to maintain it. You know, Billy Joe can't just tow a Reaper drone to his shack to recalibrate his targeting AI or something. What an average ANCAP commune could do at most is maintain or create small arms and crude explosives, maybe. So the ANCAP dream stumbles right at the starting line. And right here, right now, I could just stop bothering with all this, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. Let's give it all to ANCAPs, the most ideal scenario imaginable for the emergence of real-life anarcho-capitalism. An imaginary world where every country transitioned into anarcho-capitalism at the exact same time, all corporations were completely dissolved, all nuclear weapons were disarmed, and all complex military hardware beyond small arms was disposed of. All you have is people living freely with their guns, ready to enter into voluntary contracts with each other, having inherited all the infrastructure built out by the now dissolved governments, and everyone getting a fresh start at capitalism. So I believe that this would be a perfect, or at least near perfect, condition for anarcho-capitalism. So how will things work out? Let's take a look. Wait, what's this? Oh, that's right, my channel has been taken over by Vladimir Putin. Okay, it hasn't been actually taken over, and these folks are actually anti-Putin, and they are the sponsors of today's video. Boney Right is a YouTube channel that dives into all kinds of topics and gives you a deeper look into things such as why prices have suddenly risen because of the container shortage, or how the chip crisis is affecting us all. Their latest video is a personal investigation into Russian vaccines, whether they even work, and what exotic difficulties Russians must endure if they want to get vaccinated. It's some high quality content with great animations. No wonder that Russian language channels have more than 1 million subs, Jesus Christ. Don't worry though, Boney Right is in English. You'll find the link in the description. Thank you for checking out Boney Right. Ads like this help support what I do. And now, back to Ancapistan.
You guys better get used to it.
So our little simulation will have two relevant parameters. Number one is that everybody will act according to their rational self-interest without exception, and number two, there will be no Deus Ex Machina type situations, meaning everything will develop organically as a logical continuation of the events that happened before. So over here we have a network of smaller settlements, each operating their own basic infrastructure just like during medieval times. In these settlements, eventually some people start getting more successful at capitalism than others. Let's call them great men. And we'll be focusing on one of them, this fellow called Billy Bob, living in the town of Einvale. Now Einvale does have its own little water system, but the water quality is not the greatest. It's drinkable, but it tastes kind of funny, and if you have any sort of stomach problems, it just tends to make the problem worse. Now Billy Bob runs a saloon in town, and he thinks thinks the water quality is hindering his sales because it makes his liquor taste worse. And to help run his business smoother, using his knowledge of distillers, he puts together a water purifier so he can disconnect from the local water system and save money, and also have better tasting liquor. Now his water purifier ends up being a success, able to produce large quantities of water with a low energy cost, which is somewhat even better quality than the water from the system. Now he produces more water than he needs by a considerable margin, so he starts selling it off to people. With those profits, plus his increased revenue from liquor sales, he puts together a second machine in his free time. This time he works out some of the bugs, and the new machine turns out to be slightly more efficient and produces even better quality water. He now sells a lot of water and makes large amounts of money. Now Billy Bob is forward thinking and keeps reinvesting his revenue back into his business. With his profits, he buys a plot of land behind the saloon and builds a huge water storage tank. He also builds out pipes to the farmlands nearby and starts selling his water to the farmers. With his increasing profits, he hires workers to build and maintain water purifiers. Soon enough, he has enough capital to offer a handsome amount for the local water system.
Man, he's like really going through it, eh? Like it's like step by step. He's like taking these little ant caps by the hand and be like, okay, come along, little ant cap. Let's follow your dreams. Let's go. Do. And the whole time the little ant cap's sitting there being like, oh yay, okay, let's go along. And like it's just gonna turn into like this twisted, distorted version so quickly. And it's just, but like it's so clearly like patting them on the head and trying so hard to not be mean to the little ant caps.
The owners like his offer and sell him.
Alex, this is a video from Adam Something, who's become something of an internet sensation, talking about the trouble with Anarcho Capitalism. Which, I mean, the trouble with Anarcho Capitalism is that it's neo-feudalism. Like, what do you think's going to happen?
All their infrastructure. After all, they weren't making as much money on it anyway, they didn't really know what they were doing, the water quality was bad, they had a large maintenance backlog, and most people in Ainvale just went on collecting rainwater and boiling it anyway. So they are more than happy to just pull the golden parachute and get rid of all their problems and go on to do something else. Following the acquisition, Billy Bob founds the Bill and Robert Water Company. Now everyone in town is his current or potential customer. Billy Bob has his workers connect his purifiers to the system, filling the pipes with his water. He also spends on maintenance, replacing rusty pipes and leaky valves, which increases the water quality and reduces water loss. His customer base starts to grow rapidly. People happily sign a contract stating that they'll get the water cheaper than under the previous owners and at a guaranteed higher quality. They can also disconnect from Billy Bob's pipes for the equivalent of $1,000 as a service fee, but why would they? The water is cheap and great. As time goes on, other people try to get in on the water business too, offering their own water from their own purifiers. Only a few people switch over though, since Billy Bob's water is reasonably priced and of high quality, and there is a $1,000 disconnect fee which nobody wants to pay. But then a true prodigy appears, an even greater man who creates a water purifier that's even better than Billy Bob's. Worse, he starts selling the water from it, and some people actually switch over and they are very satisfied with the water. It's even cheaper and even better quality. And this even greater man even starts making some money on his business, sucking away profits from Billy Bob. Now Billy Bob gets word of this, so he visits this prodigy personally and offers to buy out his business, but he gets rejected. Now the actions of this prodigy directly threaten Billy Bob's business. He must neutralize this threat as soon as he can. Billy Bob goes on to use his considerable wealth and leverage to artificially lower the price of water even below the competitor's price. Although he goes into the red somewhat, he has enough money stockpiled to survive. The prodigy less so by virtue of being a small business. He also has to lower his price to compete, otherwise nobody would buy water from him. His customers start to dwindle, many switching back over to Billy Bob, who announces a $500 water coupon bonus to be given to all returning customers. After months of losses, the prodigy is at the end of his rope. He spent every bit of money on keeping his business alive. He sold absolutely everything he could, now living on the barest of necessities.
He's just taking his time getting to the point, which is anybody will just monopolize the market, right? That it's an inevitability that someone will monopolize the market in a capitalist system, right? He's just like really taking his time getting there. That eventually this guy just owns everything, right? Let's jump ahead. Right, what do you think this map is, right? This is all of this guy's ownings. Now he's just going to own everything, right?
Potential valuable addition to his team, that is. And so most landowners end up taking his offer. And those who initially don't are either swayed by secret deals where Billy Bob offers them a price well above market, or by threatening with accidents, quote-unquote, happening to the pipes that feed those particular plots.
Right, and then you go along until you find out you're in a situation where Billy Bob owns everything, right? And then Billy Bob can do what he wants. He can jack the rent. He owns all the property. He can pay whatever wage he wants. You have to accept it, right? It's very similar to the Virginia coal miners, right? The situation they're in. And this is the inevitability. It is what happens. We have seen it. over and over and over again. This story has played out. We've witnessed it. If you create a lawless, governmentless system and you just say, well, let's let the economics, capitalism will decide it, well, then what ends up happening is one guy monopolizes the resources. He buys all the land. He owns all the buildings. He owns all of the resources. Do you think he's going to pay you a wage that lets you get out from underneath the system, or do you think he's going to pay you just barely enough or slightly below subsistence level? Like, it's what is going to happen, and I feel like this video in particular is...
He announces the need for a contribution from everyone living inside the walls.
Like, everyone enjoying my protection must also pay into it or get out, right? Like, and he's just like going through exactly the process of how this system eventually collapses into neo-feudalism, right? But he made this video for people who are like, Anarcho Capitalism's the greatest, and I think it's the best system ever. So he's really trying to like, whereas for people like us who get it, right? Like I knew what he was getting to way back here, right? I said it outright. We're sitting here watching like a 20-minute long video being like,
To finance the upkeep of all the defenses. Most people agree to it, and those who don't are offered to move outside the walls. If they refuse, black voter security, they have to get by mostly on agricultural work, for which they get... Okay, alright, so what do we have here? A well-protected town with a fortified administrative center. Outside there is a lower class, mostly working the fields. Inside we have a privileged citizen class, and most aspects of life are controlled by a sort of nobility, who are only accountable to the man above them. And of course most of everything is owned by that man alone. So, through this simulation, by starting out with the most ideal circumstances possible for an end-cap society to rise, we ended up with a sort of enlightened feudalism. And why wouldn't we? You know, capitalism is fundamentally based on a government-like hierarchy. One that isn't democratic. So once you introduce a power vacuum by ending the government, it makes sense that capitalism will fill that vacuum, but this time with a truly autocratic structure. You know, I always hear these libertarians and ANCAPs whine about government tyranny and how taxes are theft, but I mean, when was the last time you had a say in how your workplace is run? Hey, when's the next CEO election coming up? The one you can vote in as well as an employee, not just the rich shareholders. Okay, so this was a lot of fun actually, and I think...
Well, and I feel like the anarcho-capitalism conversation really does give the opportunity to point out that people have a pretty profound misunderstanding as to what government is, right? And people see government as this like institutional power that exists, that needs to like be abolished and completely dismantled and destroyed, right? And in a funny kind of way, like you hear Reagan saying things like, the problem is government, right? Well, is that much different than when Lenin is talking about the power of the state, right? Like, but the trouble with government is that it is fundamentally, especially if it's a democracy, it is fundamentally a manifestation of the will of the populace, right? That the people are responsible for electing, and the people are responsible for maintaining the system of government. And if it's a democracy, it is, at least in theory, responsive to the will of the populace, right? And so by doing away with government and government regulation, well, you're just creating an alternative form of government, right? That all of these corporations are going to get together and talk to one another and create councils and do all that kind of stuff. And that's now your new government. So essentially, the anti-government people are kind of walking around just being like, yeah, we don't want to... They're fundamentally anti-democracy, right? They don't want to live in a democratic structure. They want to live in an autocracy or some kind of inverted totalitarian system, very much like the one we live in now. We haven't got to the point now where our democratic structures have been completely wiped away, but we're seeing how easy it is to manipulate the populace. We're seeing how easy it is to deceive the populace, right? It's very easy to deceive the populace. We're very gullible. We buy into all kinds of myths and lies and stupid shit. That is obviously on the face of it stupid, right? Like it's really, really clear that there's a lot of really dumb shit happening in our society. And so if you're a society that's this gullible and this manipulatable and is so susceptible to the high levels of technological manipulation, you don't need to abolish the democratic state, right? You don't need to get rid of the democratic structure, so long as the people are going to keep voting liberal, keep voting conservative. Why would you ever bother, right? Then you'd have a real fight. See ya, Alex. Good to see you, bud. Capitalism leads to monopoly, but that would limit competition. Brain explodes. My favorite part was how Billy Bob dealt with the upstart competitor. Even the more progressive people I know have a more an almost religious reverence for economic competition. Yeah. No, but I think it's true. Like you're saying, you live in Calgary, it might not be universal. I think it is. I think that there's a lot of people they genuinely believe that, someone will just make a better product, and then that better product will suddenly take over the market, and it'll be like magic, like the invisible hand of the free market, right, will come on through. And there's absolutely no cognitive awareness that the powerful billionaires that exist in the society will just be like, oh, that's better than my product, so I will either buy and suppress it, or I'll buy it and sell it myself. Right? So so it's a win for the monopolist no matter what. Oh, you made a better item. Well, I'll just buy it and sell it myself. Or I'll do like the fossil fuel industry has done with electric cars and electric generation for decades, which is buy it and suppress it. Because that's a technology that undercuts our entire business model, right? And so this technology suppression is common in capital. And so this belief that, some upstart teenager in his parents' basement is going to make a different type of engine or a different type of item, and he'll introduce it into the capitalist system, and then everybody all at once will pick up their heads and go, oh, wow, that's better than what I'm doing. I'm going to shell out a bunch of money immediately right away. And the industry that exists that person is competing with will completely let it happen. Right? It's just another type of delusion. It's just another form of magical thinking that exists in our society. The power of marketing, though, can make bad products seem amazing through the power of paid reviews. Well, yeah, and there's that too. People do not actually accept how much $1 billion is. That's really what it always comes down to. I find that I have these big conversations with people about stuff, and eventually it comes to a point where I say to them, do you not really understand how much $1 billion actually is? Are you not let's talk about that. That's the thing that we should be talking about. If you have $1 billion, right? If you have one, forget about people like Jeff Bezos, right? Forget about hundreds of billions of dollars, right? Forget about that kind of stuff. $1 billion, okay? And assume that you're willing to spend $100,000 for any job you want to hire for, right? And anyone in the society is going to work any job for $100,000, right? And of course, you could even pay less if you really wanted to, but let's just say every job I'm talking about here is $100,000. So if a guy had $1 million, right, and you wanted to hire a full-time lawyer on retainer, it's $100,000. That's 10% of your net wealth, right, or of your earnings that year. Let's say you made $1 million. If you make $100 million, right, it's 0.1%. If you have $1 billion, it's 0.001% to hire a lawyer full-time to just deal with your shit. So that means you can actually hire 10 lawyers, have them on retainer all the time, dealing with all of the shit that's coming your way. And this is just your personal finances. This has nothing to do with any of your businesses or anything, right? If you make $1 billion, you get 10 lawyers, and you just don't even give a shit. It doesn't even matter. Oh, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. That's nice. Yeah, with the poker chips, right? I just think, I do think those sorts of visualizations are important, because lots and lots of people don't realize a single billionaire with $1 billion can fundamentally create a town. You can create a little society around yourself just with money. You literally can just walk up to somebody and be like, you are now the lawyer. You are now the engineer. You are now this. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And all of those people will go and do it. And it doesn't matter how insane it is. It doesn't matter how ridiculous what you're planning is. If you have $1 billion, you can do it. Because if you spent, like, how... here, $1 billion divided by 100,000. So 10,000. That's how many people you can hire, right? So cut that in half, right? So if you have $1 billion, you can hire 5,000 people to do anything you like. Anything you like. You can hire 5,000 people and still have $500 million bucks. No. Like, no. That's incredibly stupid. That's incredibly stupid. A single individual at any time should not simply be able to hold up money and say, come work for me doing anything I say. Like, that's gross. Like, how much damage do you think 5,000 people could do? Like, let's say one of these billionaires decides, yeah, I'm a full-on neo-Nazi, right? Like, fuck the Jews, fuck the blacks, fuck all these guys, right? All this kind of, I'm a straight-up neo-Nazi, right? I'm going to hire 5,000 people, and how much damage do you think they could do, right? Or somebody like the Koch brothers, right? I don't want people to believe in climate change. I can hire 5,000 people to manipulate the situation. How much damage do you think they could do, right? And even if it's something innocuous, like I want the society to really fall in love with Hello Kitty. Well, how much damage do you think 5,000 people could do in that regard? What kind of institutions do you think a billionaire could get set up? Places like PragerU, places like the Fraser Institute, right? These places that literally would not exist if not for the billionaire class. And it always comes down, and I feel this way completely about the ANCAP conversation, is that people do not respect that there is such a thing as just an overwhelming amount of money. That once you hit like $1 billion, unless your competitor is directly another billionaire, which it typically isn't because the billionaires talk to one another, right? That they work together to ensure that this doesn't actually happen, that they don't compete with one another. But once you have $1 billion, you might as well be a king. Like, what's the difference between somebody with $1 billion and like a king? Like, really? I noticed your window is on the right side now. Did you rearrange the apartment? No, it's always been there. It's always been there. Oh, you know what it is? It's because the webcam, I think, is going through. It's going through Zoom instead of its normal thing. So maybe the image is flipped, typically to you. So I don't know. What direction am I pointing to you right now? Am I pointing to the right or am I pointing to the left? So it's probably just the image is flipped. That's all. Mark, how you doing? This is just assuming each person has to be paid this much. Exactly, right? Like, that's if everybody is paid $100,000, right? But yeah, you could pay somebody like $20,000 or $50,000 or any of that kind of stuff to do some of the other jobs and stuff like this. So you can end up with like 10,000 people who are, yeah, the image is flipped. You could, and if you don't have that kind of comprehensive, like that kind of thought about how much a billionaire is, you can totally believe that, like, oh yeah, some teenager working in his kid's basement made a better widget and then put it on the market and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, and then along comes the billionaire and just crushes that kid. You can crush that kid by literally buying him out and then suppressing the technology. You can literally buy that kid out and then sell the technology for yourself, right? And if he's like really like, no, I'm not going to sell, I'm not going to do all that, you can bury him under marketing. Because where's his marketing department? Where's this little kid in his basement, right? Nobody's going to buy it if they don't know it exists. And you literally can and then Another trick that billionaires will do. Here's a great story. This goes back to my toy store roots. I worked at a toy store for 5 years, so you find all kinds of fun stories out. So Barbie, right? We all know Barbie. In the 90s, Barbie had a major competitor, right? Barbie had an enormous competitor. Bratz. Do you guys remember Bratz dolls? So Bratz seized about 40 or 60, just a large share of the toy market, of the doll market, right? It really threatened Barbie. It was an enormous threat to Barbie. So what did Mattel, the owners of Barbie, do? Well, they noticed that the guy that made the Bratz doll worked in the accounting department 1 year for Mattel. Big surprise. The guy that ends up making a toy also was interested in working in toys. Okay. And so they sue him, saying that Bratz is actually theirs, right? It's a completely spurious lawsuit. They had no basis, and in the end it was thrown out of court, but the legal fees bankrupted Bratz. So Barbie wins, right? And Bumbleguppy comes up with an interesting solution. Buy the bank that holds the mortgage and evict him, right? You have $1 billion, like $1 billion. Like this idea that you're all playing like a fair game, like it's a game of fucking, like, I don't know, Catan or something, where everybody's rolling dice or something, right? That as if everybody starts on the same starting line, as if everybody is moving forward with the same set of rules, and as if no one is going to do anything to prevent that kid. As if it's just a straight flow from like, I have an idea, to the consumer, right? I mean, every generation has this kind of dumb bullshit pop up. That every generation has this like really dumb idea that pops up that doesn't last very long, because it only exists within the mind of people who are between the age of like 14 and 20, right? And I look at this ANCAP shit and I'm just like, yeah, this is for like the 14-year-olds to the 20-year-olds. And I think that's why somebody like Adam Something is like, so let's talk about this. Whereas guys like me are just like, no, dude, that's neo-feudalism. Like, get your head out of your ass. Come on. Let's go. All right, that was a fun little rabbit hole. Oh, I am truly feeling it, guys. This I wanted to share with you guys. I really love this meme. It comes from the Crypto Naturalist at Crypto Nature. The universe is in an ongoing explosion. That's where you live, in an explosion. We absolutely don't know what living is. Sometimes atoms just get very haunted. That's us. When an explosion explodes hard enough, dust wakes up and thinks about itself. And tweets about it. I rather like this one. That's really fun. Just like the statement, when an explosion explodes hard enough, dust wakes up and thinks about itself. That's rather pleasing. From the Millennial Snowflake, bourgeois intellectual, society is the product of human reason and therefore subject to chick gazes at slave plantation. Except for economic matters. You see, those are a fixed part of human nature. And this ties in exactly to what we're talking about, right? That, like, human nature, even down to economic matters, are malleable. They can change. We as humans have the capacity to make decisions and change how we want the system to operate. We obviously can do that. We have done it. It's observable. You can see it. And the idea that an economic system that we invented, that we created, can't also be altered or changed, is completely propagandistic, right? Who does it benefit to try to convince these little ANCAP kids that, oh yeah, you could just make a better widget and put it on the market and everything will be fine? Who does that benefit, that little narrative there, right? Doesn't benefit them, because if they believe it and they attempt to do it, they'll be destroyed, right? And even if they're successful, they'll be completely bought out, they'll be completely overwhelmed, they'll be completely destroyed. So who does that benefit? And this tweet I really like because it really captures that element where it's like, oh yes, the bourgeois intellectual class will 100% say things like, oh yes, reason and subject to change and all this kind of stuff. Oh, except when it comes to who actually does the work, right? Like, oh, you do all the work, please. That can never change. That's a law of nature. You doing all the work, that can never change. The most amazing thing about capitalism is that every year, through technological improvements, workers produce more in the same amount of time, but never once has this resulted in us working fewer hours. Interesting point. Interesting point. And here's a fun little meme. I'm going down a little meme hole right now. And the argument that anything is just human nature dismisses the fact that we deal with any nature we have in a million ways. Like, but we don't care about nature. Like, we don't give a shit about nature. Like, we view ourselves as gods. That's what it all is. That, like, the anti-mask movement that exists in the United States is literally a bunch of petulant children pretending like they are gods. That they don't need to respond to external stimuli. They don't need to respond to what's rational. They don't need to respond with compassion or empathy. They don't need to care about other people in the society, because what I think is what's important, right? What I think is what's important. The American Bill of Rights that walked about man deserving to be free owned slaves. Exactly. We free Americans, slave owners, right? Like there's just like a ton of paradoxes that exist within the Western ethos. And that's a big one. These people that say to me all the time, they're like, oh, communism is the worst system. I literally am like, the Declaration of Independence was written by slave owners. They literally owned slaves while writing a document to declare their independence, while simultaneously committing a genocide against the First Nations people. You literally cannot find this equivalency in any communist system. It doesn't exist, and yet it's just to be completely ignored. It's to be completely ignored. You cannot talk about it. Yeah, aristocracy isn't human nature. What do you think the French Revolution was about? Exactly. And this speaks to this meme as well, right? Capitalism, liberals, let us use it against the 1%. Leftists, you can't wield it. None of us can. It answers to the 1% alone, right? It's absolutely the truth. It's absolutely the truth. Dave, bad hair pieces mainly. Oh, you might be onto something there, Dave. I don't know if I'm going to show this whole thing in its entirety. I don't really have another video lined up. I have to take a minor break. Just going to take a minor break here, guys. Can I show you one of the juicier things about this? Because, like, this is a great... In fact, I'm actually going to share this in the chat. It's a great documentary. I just watched it right before the chat. It's about an hour long. I don't know if I want to show the whole thing. But I do want to show Churchill. Yeah, here we go. This is a good section.
Bonds with our informants are humble and honest people. Churchill's position is more aggressive. He approaches the US with his plans for Operation Unthinkable, an alliance of Anglo-Saxons and Nazis, and the massive bombing of Soviet cities.
Der Krieg war noch nicht zu Ende. Potsdam noch lange nicht in Sicht. Aber Churchill hat schon den Auftrag erteilt, einen neuen Kriegsplan. Es war schlicht und einfach ein Angriff auf die Sowjetunion geplant. Und man wollte dabei 100.000 gerade besiegte Soldaten der deutschen Wehrmacht, das zu charakterisieren, dürfte jedem Denkenden eigentlich überlassen bleiben. Es ist einfach unehrlich.
I get up every morning and pray that Stalin is alive and well. Only Stalin can save the world. Winston Churchill. Once the world was saved, Churchill changed his mind. Any attempt by the Soviets to compete against the Anglo-Saxons had to be quashed forever. The USSR has to be eliminated immediately. General George S. Patton, commander of the US Third Army, demands that the troops do not stop at the Elbe, but move on towards Stalingrad. On June 29, 1945, Stalin, who already knows about the operation, orders Marshal Zhukov to move troops to combat positions in the west. It is now clear to the Allies that a surprise attack is no longer possible.
Wenn Churchill bekanntlich die deutschen Kriegsgefangenen sozusagen mobilisiert hat gegen Deutschland, erneut die Waffen sozusagen gegen die Sowjetunion damals zu richten, in Norddeutschland, und er zur Potsdamer Konferenz kommt, Stalin ihn fragt, ja, was ist denn das? Ist da was da? Was macht ihr da? Und Churchill sagt, ja, da bin ich nicht informiert, da muss ich mich informieren. Dieses Doppelspiel eigentlich der Westmächte.
That's enough. We're no longer interested in a union with the Russians, so we don't have to abide by the agreements with them. We need to make the Yalta Accords non-existent. Harry Truman. But the Allies need the Red Army in the Far East.
Yeah, it's the communists though, guys. It's the communists that are the scary ones, right? Like after World War II, the Allies are literally taking Nazi troops, right? Trying to galvanize them and mobilize them to invade the Soviet Union, right? DM, a hot tip here. Aaron O'Toole vows to scrap Canada Infrastructure Bank. I suspect that that's being done so that he can erect his own. Right? That the Canada Infrastructure Bank has become seen as a very liberal project, right? But the Conservatives will put in something similar, and it's the same, and it's going to be the same thing, right? It's going to be the same fucking, like, I would be blown away. Wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it be absolutely crazy, guys, if, let's say, like, Aaron O'Toole gets his minority, and he, like, starts putting forward, like, and he should do this if he gets a minority government. It'd be good politics for him. If he starts putting forward like progressive legislation to actually help people, right? He'll do it in a conservative sort of way, but let's say he does this. And then suddenly, like, next election comes around, he gets his majority, and then he actually is, like, an egalitarian, like, man, working class man of the people. Wouldn't that be wild? Wouldn't it be wild? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Aaron O'Toole is just one of those guys who I was describing before, right? The billionaires are like, hey, I have $100,000, Mr. O'Toole, right? And Aaron O'Toole is just like, sweet, thanks. Pocket, says what he's supposed to say, right? And this to me is the number one reason why a billionaire is the most dangerous, that it's extremely dangerous to have even a single billionaire, is that, like, I just created a fairly good argument that they could, like, buy 5,000 people. Well, you only need 170, right? You only need 170 if you want to own the parliament, right? A red Tory can't be all that bad. Look at what the red Tories did for Manitoba. I think that these conservatives are wolves in sheep's clothing. Like, that's 100% what it is. It's a Trojan horse. Right, that they're gonna say anything they need to say. They're gonna talk any game they need to talk. They're gonna try to convince anyone and everyone to vote for them, so that they can sell everybody out to neoliberal capital. Like, oh, big surprise! Sociopaths that want to erect a wage slave system are also willing to lie about it. Like, it's pretty plain, if you ask me. Like, it's pretty on the face of it. Well, guys, it's getting to be about that time. We got a moment here. The fellow who I'm going to be interviewing is supposed to be coming in at 8. So, naming names: Adolf Husinger, Johann Steinhoff, Johann von Klebske. What is this list of names for, Mark? What is this list of names for? So, I'm going to play the song I always like to play, guys. You know the one. I hope if there's somebody in the chat who hasn't actually heard this song, this is what I call the Care Bear stare against neoliberal capital. It's called Antarctica is Covered in Ice. question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes and sweeps me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? When everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know that we can do it. I know that we can do it. The solutions that we are facing have very simple and straightforward answers. That the problems that we create by simply stopping our pollution are far easier to confront than the problems that we create by continuing our onslaught against the earth itself. And either way, whether we stop or no, we will be confronted with the miraculous, overwhelming power of the earth. And if we want to stand back in awe and witness the earth heal itself and return back into the garden that it was before we were even here, all we have to do is stop. And that's right, DM. It's doable. The will is not there by many. What's funny is that I do think the will is there. I just think we don't know what to do. And we haven't gotten to a place as a people where we're willing to accept what must be done. And what must be done is that we have to surround the halls of power and we have to confront the system of capital. It's very straightforward in my view that right now we're caught in this odd sort of belief that we can just continue negotiating, that we're just going to talk our way out of it. That's not how the capitalist class works. That's not how capitalism works, right? That what must be done, like, for goodness sakes, like, there are protest movements that exist here in Toronto that are refusing to even close down streets, right? So tepid and timid are they, right? Like, no political organization or capitalist organization is going to give a shit about that. Go have your protest. Go walk down, the sidewalk, right? Go stand in Nathan Phillips Square with your signs, right? And it doesn't matter how many people you have, right? Bring 1,000 people, right? If you're willing to stand off on the side in the designated zone, right, and have your little protest in the designated protest zone, right? And then once the time is up, you disperse and everything was orderly and everything was in line, right? Okay. No one gives a shit at all. Like, at best, you might convince some politician somewhere to pander to you in order to get your vote. And then they'll not actually pass the legislation that you were protesting for in the first place. And that's your best case scenario, right? If you actually want something done in this Western democracy, such that it is a democracy, well, you gotta go to the halls of power and surround them and keep them surrounded. That's how things have always worked. That's how every piece of positive legislation that has been passed in Canada and the United States has been done through mass protest movements. And standing on the street corner with, your buddies, that's not a mass protest movement. Like, if you are unwilling to shut down streets, if you are unwilling to occupy infrastructure, if you are unwilling to get in the way of the convenience of the powerful, then you're not meaningful. You're not doing anything, right? And that is ultimately what it is going to take. Because the alternative is just fascism, right? Like, let's not fool ourselves that the powerful will absolutely destroy this place, right? They will absolutely destroy this place if it comes down to it, right? Just take a look at the documentary I just showed you. Literally, before World War II is over, the Allies are planning an invasion of the Soviet Union and a full-scale bombardment of the Soviet Union, right? They have no problem with destroying the people and destroying the infrastructure and destroying and as we go along with this documentary, they get into what they did to Yugoslavia, for God's sakes. Here.
I izazvao veliku katastrofu.
This is footage from
Allied
Yugoslavia in the
force has been
90s.
called a genocide, with Slobodan Milosevic's tyrannical regime the justification. But many say the real reason was Yugoslavia's economic independence and refusal to join NATO.
And what's the reason for it? Why did they bomb Yugoslavia? Well, the guy just said it. They just literally were like, no, we'd like to be our own independent nation with our own sovereignty, please. Okay, then we'll just bomb the shit out of you, make you pay for that. You don't get to have that. We here in the United States, we don't care about your sovereignty, right? And if they're willing to do that to other nations, they're 100% willing to do it to you. They're 100% willing to do it to you. That I feel like everybody is sort of holding their breath, hoping that the political organizations of our society are going to pull up on this. They're not going to do that. Show me one time where that's happened. Show me one time in all of human history where the wealthy elites of the nation were heading towards catastrophe, and they actually decided to pull up on it and resolve the issue without some sort of mass conflagration. Because to avoid a mass conflagration means for the powerful to step down on their power. It means for the powerful to cede their power. It means that Frodo needs to throw the One Ring into Mount Doom, right? It means that they need to actually reject the power that they have, and they're not going to do that, right? And if the protest is televised in mainstream media, chances are the protest is approved by the billionaire class. Exactly, right? That the revolution will not be televised. Right? They're not gonna show you. They're not gonna show you these things, right? Like you're not gonna know about it unless you come to like whack jobs like me who actually go out and do like hours of research in order to find this stuff out. But like we are being confronted right now, and I mean I struggle with how hard I need to be pounding on this issue. Like, I don't want to turn into like an Alex Jones, like Fox News fear-mongering type, where I'm just like, oh, they're coming for our kids, and they're gonna destroy the society, and they're gonna turn the frogs gay, right? Like none of that shit, right? But like, capitalism has a long history of turning its ugly hand against its own populace. And certainly a long history of turning its ugly hand against populaces that are external to itself, right? It's been that way since the beginning. And I know that we're all sort of hoping that it's not going to do that to us this time around, but it can, and it will, right? It's not going to spare us just because why? Why do we believe we will be spared when previous generations were not spared? When previous peoples, when currently our society is engaged in multiple wars that are senseless and pointless and do nothing except take our tax money and enrich weapons manufacturers. It's literally the only reason these wars exist, is to transfer wealth away from the populace into the hands of a rapacious sociopathic billionaire class. That is already happening in the society. What makes you think they're not going to open fire on us? What makes you think they're not going to do that? Like I feel like I'm constantly having the same conversation over and over and over again, where I'm like trying to convince people in the right wing that there are white supremacists that exist, and the response I'm getting is just delusion. It's just like, nope, that doesn't exist. You're being hyperbolic. Oh, how hysterical. It doesn't matter what I show them. Right? It doesn't matter what I show them. Because it's not literally Adolf Hitler doing Nazi salutes, it cannot be fascism or white supremacy, right? And that's what's happening on the right. And then on the left, there's a similar form of delusion, which is to say that, oh, we can just talk our way out of it. That the same people that are completely willing to destroy Iraq, destroy Syria, destroy Afghanistan, destroy Libya, maintain a genocide within the borders of Israel, maintain a genocide in Yemen, do things like the bombing of Yugoslavia, do things like put sanctions on the people of Venezuela, put sanctions throughout Russia, and all of that, while simultaneously creating a genocide along their own border with the Mexican-United States border, and have concentration camps and the whole thing. Yeah, those guys are 100% going to listen to reason when we say things like, hey, it's just cheaper to alleviate poverty. They don't care. Like, they don't care. And I feel like I'm sitting here seeing just like the most delusional bullshit on all sides of it. Whether it's from the right and they're just saying, oh, that's so overwrought, and oh, well, I don't, all of that, oh, well. Or from the left, where they're just like, yeah, we can just talk our way out of it. No. Like, like, no. Like, the fascists and the powerful will happily have the conversations with us and then do nothing and just stand by and watch as we get crushed. They'll happily do that, right? What makes you think they won't? Right? Like, you've watched them do it to other people your whole life. You've watched them do it to other people your entire life. What's got you so convinced that they're not going to turn around and go, oh, yeah, I could do that to you too? What's got you so convinced? I see a lot of people walking around saying things like we need to start acting with urgency. And then when I say, okay, well, let's take to the streets and take over a street and protest, and they go, oh, I don't know, that sounds unpolite to me. I don't want to be... So, come to my protest, September 18th, 2 p.m., Yonge and Dundas Square. We're going to actually shut down the street because we're actually leftists. We actually go to the streets. We actually shut down infrastructure. We actually do stuff that leftists actually need to do. Because eventually there will come a time where the entire populace will need to be out in the streets and will be galvanized in order to do so. And I will be standing there with my little beacon being like, hey, we've been doing this the whole time. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. I'm just, it's kind of exhausting. It's kind of exhausting just the dickering. The dickering. The idea that we can just negotiate our way out of it. Like the liberals want to negotiate with the sun, right? Like, it's not how it's going to work. It's not how it's going to work at all. I hope you guys are doing well out there. I know that's heavy talk, man. That's heavy talk. That's heavy talk. And I try to keep things not so dire, right? But like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've got the vaccine. I've got the vaccine flowing through my veins, and so it's infecting my brain with the nanobots from Bill Gates. I love that conspiracy shit, dude. I actually do. I actually really do. Like, I love talking about conspiracies. I love what's got me pissed off about the modern conspiracies, right? Especially surrounding COVID, is that they are so stupid. Like, they're so easy to disprove, right? Like, at least the old school conspiracy theories, like the moon landing being fake, not even 9/11. Like, even 9/11, the JFK assassination, that's another good one. Bigfoot, right? Those ones at least had a certain degree of credibility at all times, right? That there always was sort of an intrigue or a mystery, and part of the intrigue and the mystery of a lot of those conspiracy theories were, and a lot of those conspiracy theories was that you didn't know. It was all speculative, right? There was there was always this potential that there was going to be this linchpin piece of evidence that came out, and it was going to prove everything, and everybody was going to suddenly go, oh shit, like, oh, there it is. What you guys have been speculating on, it's all true, right? But with like the COVID stuff, there's no linchpin. There's no like piece of linchpin evidence that's going to prove that it's like this big global conspiracy or all this kind of stuff. It's extremely proof. Like, everything is easy to disprove, like childishly easy. And so it's so disappointing. It's so disappointing. I like my conspiracy theories to have a bit of mystery and intrigue. Thank you very much. And denying the existence of COVID, like, Bill Gates is putting nanobots in your vaccine has like a bit of traction, but even then, it's like, why would he do that? Why would he do that? Ugh. Our conspiracy on Reddit is a right-wing cesspool. Yeah, I had to leave. I used to be part of our conspiracy, but it just... I was part of our conspiracy back when they were actually building a case in the 9/11 movement. They were actually sitting there being like, here is a piece of evidence. Here is a document. Here is something that is tangible and real. and people were actually putting together, like, from actual documents, interviews, and things like this, right? And, like, somebody like Noam Chomsky would release his critique of the 9/11 report, and they were very much on that, and there was, like, it was all very, like, structured and interesting. And yeah, exactly, that place used to be chill, because it used to be filled with people who were like, evidence, please. Right? You would say something like this crazed conspiracy nonsense, or this COVID nonsense, and people would be like, evidence, please. And those guys would get chased out, because they're like, no, we are actually interested in actual conspiracies that are actual with evidence and facts and things like this. That's what we're actually into. Yeah, I hear you on this, Major Hydraulic. I think that lots of people, centrists and leftists generally, have been ready to get into the streets, but COVID-19 has stopped. Yeah, and COVID has been a real disorient. There's been a big disorientation because of it, right? That the timing of it is, like, if I was like a big brain conspiracy guy, I'd be like, interesting timing on this COVID thing. Just as the climate change issue is starting to get hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, along comes a virus and says, oh, you can't get into gatherings anymore. Right? Oh, interesting timing. But that's just good storytelling, if you ask me. And if you hang around the channel long enough, you find out that I do think that we live in an energy that is itself sentient. So storytelling is probably at the forefront of its mind. What happened to Bigfoot? He was entertaining. It's just you know what Bigfoot really needs? Bigfoot needs, like, one big shot in the arm. It just needs one piece of evidence to really... Joe Rogan did a thing on Bigfoot, because he also is like me in this regard, where he's fascinated by conspiracies. And so he did a Bigfoot thing, and I think that kind of destroyed the whole thing. You know, I think Joe Rogan was too big. He got too in the face of it and got too deep with it. And I feel like everybody kind of took a look at the Bigfoot movement and went, oh, it's actually kind of sad. It's not fun anymore. I actually feel kind of bad about these guys. Yeah, I feel a bit bad about them. Yeah, the conspiracies suck now. Like, the moon landing was fake. Come on, that's a great conspiracy theory, dude. The moon landing being fake? That's like the creme de la creme, because it's, like, not really provable, but there's, like, a lot of evidence surrounding it and all of this kind of stuff. And interestingly, I think that the end of the moon landing conspiracy, at the end of it all, I think that they did fake the footage, but I definitely think they landed on the moon. So they, like, sent everybody, and they went and they did the whole thing, and that's obvious that they did that. For goodness sakes, you can, like, see the flag from the Earth. Like, you're telling me the Soviets wouldn't just, like, hold up a telescope and be like, there's no flag on the moon? Like, you're telling me they wouldn't do that? So they definitely went. They definitely put stuff there. Like, they definitely did all of that. But I do think the footage is fake. And I think that they faked the footage for the nicest reason you'd ever think, right? Which is that I think they just wanted to have footage. I think that they spent a lot of money to do this. I think that they were in a cultural race, a cultural war with Russia. I think they wanted to maximize the impact in the populace. And if I wanted to say it the nicest way ever, well, then maybe they wanted to just have some nice footage for people to see, right? Something nice for people to see. Like, oh, we're up here, come on. And so I think they faked the footage. And I genuinely think that if they had have just put the word reenacted, if they had just said reenactment and put that in, like, the right-hand corner, like right here where my fingers are, or where it says John Sanderson right over here, reenacted, I think everyone on the planet would have been like, oh yeah, so they're just doing a reenactment. Yeah. How would they get a film crew into space anyway? Yeah. Would film even survive in space? Like, and people would have just shrugged about it and been like, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of nice, isn't it? But but in the end, they for sure went. They for sure were there. I just think they faked the footage. It's the fifth cardinal direction: north, south, east, west, and here. Gotta know where you are to know where to go. Oh, that's actually quite insightful, Bubble Guppy. That's actually quite insightful. So we are at this point. Maybe aliens were caught in the initial footage. You know what's amazing about the alien stuff? So, like, the alien conspiracies, right? The alien conspiracy stuff. I actually think most of the populace is now completely cool with the idea that, like, if aliens showed up, we'd just be like, yeah, hey, how you guys doing? I mean, I think it would fuck us up, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it would be like, whoa! I don't think it would result in this big, like, cultural upheaval, which was always the argument for why they would keep it secret, right? Well, let's keep aliens a secret because there's a big cultural upheaval and all this kind of stuff. But, like, because of COVID and because and because of the collapse of neoliberal capitalism and because of how shitty the whole system is, I do think that if, like, aliens landed and we're like, hey, we're aliens, we'd just be like, fantastic. Great. I hope that you guys don't get fucked up by us too. You know? Aliens were caught in the initial footage. That'd be amazing. There was actually a really great episode of Frasier. Weird reference. Really great episode of Frasier where they had Buzz Aldrin on the show, and Buzz Aldrin admits on Frasier's show that he saw aliens. Because the idea is that Buzzy's getting old, and so he's kind of losing his mind a little bit. So he starts talking about, yeah, we met these aliens, and like and talks about the alien encounter he had. Buzz Aldrin was such a good sport on that show, man. He made him. It was like one of those situations where he looked like a lunatic in the end of it, right? And I remember one of the major moments that really convinced me to start getting on board with the idea that, like, no, they went to the moon, they landed on the moon. Was that one of these, like, they faked the moon landing guys confronted Buzz Aldrin and started to get into his face about it. And Buzz Aldrin just lined him up and just popped him right here. Just like a perfect jab right in the face. And then just stormed off like all red-faced and angry about it while the guy was like clutching his mouth. And I really thought to myself, that guy was on the moon. Like, that guy was for sure on the moon. Like, this, I'm not going to take this bullshit from this fucking kid getting in my face and denying the fact that I was the fucking second man to walk on the moon. Bam! And that was the moment that I really was like, yeah, probably. And then there's also a really great David Mitchell, who's a great English comedian. He and his partner, Webb, I forget his first name, they did a little sketch where they were like, okay, we're going to fake the moon landing. And it's like, well, don't you think that people will want to see a rocket go off into space? Yes, so we'll need to build a fully functioning rocket. And there need to be astronauts inside of it, of course, because we need people to be interviewed. Yes, of course, so astronauts in space. And it will actually have to go to space, because we'll be filming it, and everyone will be able to see that. Well, okay, so seeing as it's gone into space in the first place, like, we have to put something on the moon, don't we? Yes, I suppose. So I guess the rocket should go to the moon to put something on the moon. Yeah, and eventually they start talking their way down, and they just sort of look at each other and be like, well, you know, we're already there. Why don't we just pop on down, you know, take a few photographs and leave? And I was just like, yeah, this is a very convincing argument. Because, like, they did shoot a rocket into space, right? There were astronauts on that rocket, right? We know it was possible because, exactly as Bumbleguppy says, the USSR has every other space first, so they would go into space. French debate on in 5 minutes with Enemy Paul. Wonder why? I wonder that myself. Why 2 French and only 1 English, right? I wonder that myself. I don't quite know why they've done it that way. And I bet you it's some liberal thing where they want they want to try and shore up their base in Quebec. And so they're going to... And Trudeau does well in Quebec, right? For obvious reasons. And honestly, like, do we need 2? Do we need 2 English debates? Do we really need 2 English debates? How many English speakers do we believe are going to watch this thing in the first place? Right? Do you think a whole bunch of English speakers are actually going to watch this thing in the first place? And so, like, doing 2... I mean, I am kind of the opinion that we should do one a week. Like, that's how I would want to see it. I would want to see it. I'd want to see, like, we've declared it. Let's give it a week and then do a debate. Give it another week, do another debate. Give it another week, do another debate. Give it another week, do another debate. Everybody votes, right? If you're on a 4-week, because, like, I think that it should be more of a conversation. Bring in Bernier into the debate. It would make things more interesting. And I've heard some people arguing that we should be platforming a man like Bernier, right? We should be. We should listen to what he has to say and realize how kind of repulsive it actually is. I finally saw one article in the entirety of the mainstream talking about the fact that Bernier has a white supremacist perspective. It was like buried in like chapter of paragraph 4 of a thing that was saying, or a subject a week, or just like give people a chance to sort of like figure out what it is they actually care about, you know, and actually talk about things and have. I just wish it was more of a discussion, you know. I just wish, because like Lord knows our media is not having a discussion about it. Like our media is not like it doesn't. The housing crisis was a conversation point for like 5 seconds. They're not talking about climate change. Like climate change is like not on the docket. Like they're talking about really dumb shit. They're talking about like, oh, the guns and all this and then that, and like nobody knows what the fuck to even think about any of this. It's so annoying, right? It's so annoying. Just to remind you guys, I should have a guest coming into my Zoom call here in 5 minutes, right? So anytime now I may be interrupted by a fellow coming on in here, and I'm going to do a bit of an interview with him. I don't know how it's going to go. So don't expect a thing, but I do think it's going to be an interesting interview, because it's going to be with a fellow who has been on the front lines dealing with the anti-maskers in their more serious offshoots, that people that the anti-maskers will do their walk, and then some of them will shoot off and go harass business owners, and of course, you know, non-white business owners. Big shocker there. And he, along with a couple of other people, have been confronting them and chasing them off. And that's the kind of direct action that is starting to become necessary, honestly. And so I look forward to talking to him when he pops on in. So I've got time to kill. What can I say? So why don't we just... I've actually run out of resources. Ontario prepares to launch digital ID program. Okay, that's just digitizing. Topics set to be debated tonight: climate change, cost of living and public finances, Indigenous peoples and cultural identity, justice and foreign policy, healthcare, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, and if you guys tune in tomorrow, I am going to be airing the English debate after my stream, because it goes up at 9 p.m. My stream ends at 9 p.m., so it's perfect. Hey, Demand Better, how you doing? Fellow seductresses of the left. Well, I rather like that. Fellow seductresses of the left. Hey. I love that this meme has still maintained its circulation, right? Bernie Sanders should be forced to give away 90% of his birthday cake. This is how birthday cakes work when you have friends, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Blue lives literally don't exist. Professions aren't people. And spending your 40-hour work week terrorizing poor people of color doesn't make you special. Abolish the police. Yeah. In American mythology, people are rich because of hard work. Yet no one can explain why those who do all the actual labor have no money. Oh. Well, and this mythology of the meritocracy mythology, right? The meritocracy mythology is it's on the same level as similar conspiracy. Have a good one, Dave. Thanks for popping in, bud. Good to see you. Like the meritocracy myth should be enough to discredit anyone who actually believes it, right? Like when I first started listening to Jordan Peterson, not to turn this into like a big Jordan Peterson section, but that was one of the things that he kept saying that just made me be like, nah, this guy sort of discredits himself with this, because the idea that this is a meritocracy is as much of a conspiracy theory as like COVID doesn't exist. You might as well, it's on that same sort of scale. It's so easy to disprove. Like, it's so easy to disprove. You don't even need to do like research. You don't even need to do any like cursory kind of thing like that. You literally just need to ask yourself, oh, okay, it's meritocracy. So the people at the top, right, are the smartest, the hardest working, have the best ideas. That's the whole idea behind a meritocracy. Oh, okay, who is the wealthiest person in Canada, right? Should be real smart, should have the best ideas, right? Should have all this kind of stuff. And when you ask that question, who's the wealthiest Canadian? Oh, it's literally like a fourth generation hereditary billionaire. So much for your meritocracy, right? Like, so much for your meritocracy. And does, that's just the exception. You know, every system has an exception. Okay, well, then the guy underneath him is in the same situation, right? So the first guy is David Thompson, literally with the title, the third Baron of Fleet, like a hereditary billionaire, monarch no less. And we go down the list, and you got the Weston family, right? And then you've got like Joseph Tsai, and you've got the Pattinsons, the Irvings, and it's the same story over and over and over again. Like, none of these people are like the best at what they do and all this kind of stuff. They're literally hereditary billionaires. They're literally like, my daddy monopolized an industry and now I'm a billionaire. That's the story of the wealth of the nation. But we're all supposed to walk around and be like, it's meritocracy. It's a meritocracy. Yeah. Update. CBC polls says CPC up by 0.7%, Libs down by 0.3%. Yeah, that's well within the margin of error, so I don't worry too much about it. And again, I prefer aggregate polls. Like, I prefer to aggregate the polls, because if you if all you do is listen to Ecos polls, right? Then you are of the opinion that the conservatives are walking away with this in big ways. But if you listen to like Abacus data polls, then it's much closer, right? Well, and you take a look at the aggregate data, right? You can see pretty clearly that the conservatives overall are actually in a decline, right? They had their big swell, they kind of went down, right? But they have never polled as highly as they did before. Right, that they are on aggregate actually in a downward trajectory. The Trudeau Liberals, of course, have completely plateaued, that they went down and they've just sort of stayed exactly where they are for the most part. This is a bad news bears for the NDP right there. This little dot, right? This little guy, that's the lowest they've ever polled right across the board, right? That's bad news bears. Is this a trend? Who's to say? Speaking of trends, what's happening over here with the People's Party, right? Like, you've got like some things all of a sudden, but over here, all of a sudden, you know what this tells me? This tells me that people really like the protests that are happening against Trudeau. People are really in favor of that. People are like, yeah, fuck that Trudeau guy up, right? And maybe this, right, has something to do with this, right? Who's actually taking to the streets? Who's actually willing to fight? Who's actually willing to put their feet on the ground and do what must be done? It's the People's Party. Yeah, if this trend continues, right? And suddenly he's the prime minister. No, that's not going to happen. Yeah, Greens are going to lose. The aggregate data is showing that it's kind of a toss-up, right? It's a toss-up between will they, if they maintain their seats at 2, given the nature of how they lost that third seat, Because I think you'd be very, 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 very hard pressed, I think, to blame Anime Paul for that. That really, like, that's something that you should really be giving credit to the liberals for achieving. Like, that's a liberal win. That's not necessarily an Anime Paul loss, you know? But if she walks away with 1 seat, that's a huge disaster. 2 is already pretty bad. Like, going into your first election and walking out stable, right, is not exactly where you want to be, right? Not exactly where you want to be. But to remind everybody, like Jagmeet Singh, like he walked into his first election and he walked out with like way less seats, right? That the party was like, it was a catastrophe. It was a total disaster. But nobody expected him. It was his first election, right? He's rebuilding the party, all that kind of stuff. We'll see if Anime steps down or not. But I mean, I kind of hope she does. I hope she does. And can I tell you the number one reason why I hope that she does? Like, really? Because I am really, really, really concerned that she is exhausted. That this is what I see a lot of the time. She looks fucking exhausted. Like, she looks fucking exhausted. And I really, really have, like, big concerns. Just for her from a public health kind of standpoint. She looks fucking tired all the time. And anytime I see her in an interview, anytime I see her talking, anytime I see her doing that kind of stuff, she just looks like she has not slept in days. So, I just, maybe try to get a little bit more sleep, Anime. Maybe try to get a little bit more sleep. I worry about you. I worry about you, Anime. I do. Where's my man? Where's my man? He was supposed to be in here by now. Let me see if I can... If I exit this... Yeah, this is all good. Oh, maybe my man is not coming in, or maybe we're having some technical difficulties. So we're not going to actually have the interview, maybe. Always, always, always possible. Always, always, always possible. Well, that kind of means that the last hour of this is going to be really kind of slow motion. Can I flip image? I don't know. I don't. Does it matter? Do I need to flip the image? Is that something that must be done? Security participates. Nah. Oh, well. Oh, well. This is high quality content right here, don't you think, guys? John messes around with Zoom, tries to figure out why is it that someone is not coming in to the chat. High quality content. Really blowing you guys away. Yeah, me trying to explain my political ideology to normies without using scary words like communism, anarchism, or socialism. Apes together strong. Well, and it's possible it's completely technical, right? That I've got an invitation open, like he can pop in here, I'm sure. And I'm a little... Okay, I'm gonna... Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about this. Just give me one moment. Just grabbing my little netbook here so that I can open up my email. Because if it is just a technical issue that can be resolved, I would like to resolve it and get this fella in here. And I would hate to think that he's like he's sending me information and sending me all this kind of stuff. Yeah, more beer for the rest of us. That's exactly right. Hold on. You believe you have joined the meeting. I don't think you did. Okay, so he's sending me a thing saying that... Oh, so I sent him the link. You're a Labatt's guy, yeah. Sorry about this, guys. This is not exactly my favorite way to go about this. The every day I go when I go downtown or go down to the commercial area, there's an LCBO there and a wine rack that I gotta walk by, and boy howdy, is it tempting to just pop in and get a beer, right? It's so tempting to just pop in, get me a beer. I'm here. Here. I am gonna quickly... yeah, it's fine. Nothing quite like doxing myself, right? That's fine. Okay. Okay, did we do it? Are you here, Nico? If you're here, Nico, I can't hear you. It says you're in here. Technical difficulties, technical difficulties. Technical difficulties. Beer and a hot burrito. Yeah, I know, dude. It's what a dangerous combination. What a dangerous combination. Not good for my wallet and certainly not good for my waistline, I tell you. Although the burrito's not so bad, but like beer is just empty calories. Well, I don't... Oh, hello?
Hey, sorry. I know I just sent you that email and then I had to take a pee.
Oh, isn't that life?
Yes.
So, Nico.
Yes.
Are you going to be doing this with or without visual?
Without visual.
You got it, bud.
For obvious reasons. Well, actually, I'd like to explain one of the elements of what I do.
Yes, please do. I've been sort of teasing my people here to tell them what it is that you're doing. So please tell me why it is you feel a little bit uncomfortable letting people know what you look like.
Well, no, it's not so much I feel uncomfortable with letting people know what I look like. The thing about counter-protesting and making fascists afraid again is the unknown is always more terrifying than the known. When I do these things with my small group of people, we don't even refer to each other by our street names. We call each other friend, ally, comrade, although we don't use that word in front of normies. That scares them too. And I always have two masks on. Not only does that protect against corona and a little bit against doxing, although not entirely, but as I said, people are more afraid of the unknown than they are of the known.
So let's talk a bit more about what is it that it is that you are doing. Like, can you give us an example of some of the activities that you have been embarking on the streets here in Toronto?
Absolutely, and I would love to use the example of what myself and my friends did at Bar Vendetta and Rum Corner. This is how we won. And I think this is a model that anyone can use. I am not special. I'm not particularly smart. I wrote down some bullet points. There's 2 stages to what we did. Background, just quick rundown in case anyone's forgotten what's happened or if they only saw what global news reported. Global news, just had a quick 1-second blurb of what the cops said, saying there were two different groups of protesters, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Halloween. What happened was, at Bar Vendetta in Rum Corner, it was not a peaceful protest, what the anti-vaxxers were doing. It was a deliberate, targeted harassment campaign. They would go every Saturday, starting at 5:30, bang pots and pans in the ears of their customers at peak hours. You're trying to run a bar out of business by doing that. I saw them pull people's masks off. One person held a cigarette millimeters from my forehead. That's threatening bodily harm. The cops all saw that and all went, oh no, this is just a protest, blah, 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 blah. So I got there early. And the first step was aggressive, legal, and a non-violent presence. By that, I mean, I got into their face and called their moms hoes.
Okay.
Literally.
All right, good.
You're
good.
that is legal. You can get into someone's face and you can throw the nastiest insults at them. You can.
Now, are you concerned when you do that, Nico, that is going to escalate the situation? That it is going to escalate into violence if you follow through with that tactic?
I'm not going to lie. There is a risk that happens. There's always the risk of that happening, which is why it is important to have a designated cameraman. That is an important tactical benefit. Or camera woman, camera person. Sorry, old term.
So the situation is that anti-vaxxers peel off from the protest on Saturday and do a secondary moment or a secondary movement where they go and harass people at one of these local restaurants. Why do you feel they are choosing this particular restaurant? What do you think is the background behind that?
The background behind this one in particular is twofold. The owner of these 2 bars, whose name I want to keep out of this discussion, she had called out Adam Skelly, the owner of Adamson's Barbecue, the guy who kept opening up his barbecue place again and again and again when everything was shut down at the start of this mess of a pandemic. And that's what, and he has this petty, spiteful grudge, sent his minions after him. That's one element of why they were doing this. The other element is a lot of, at least the leadership of this group of people are also the people who go to the Queen's Park White Lives Matter protests. And Rum Corner, the bar next to Bar Vendetta, which is same owner, has Black Lives Matter in the window. They were saying no vaccine passports, but at the end of the day, the owner of these bars, all she did was get onto Twitter and say, I support vaccine passports.
So as you're telling me this, I'm bringing up, I just did a quick search for Adam Skelly, right? We're seeing that he's an anti-lockdown campaigner, right? Adamson barbecue location, closed over unpaid rent, right? And so this is an issue that has quite a lot of complexity onto it, right? That this Adam Skelly fellow who you're saying is part of the anti-lockdown movement. The anti-lockdown movement itself is also becoming tied into white supremacist movements here in Toronto. and that now it appears that Adam Skelly, along with these anti-lockdown protesters, are taking action against nearby competitors based on both economic lines as well as racial lines. Would that be an accurate summation?
Yeah.
So on the day,
the Venn diagram between anti-vaxxers and white supremacists isn't quite a circle, but it's close.
and so on the day, Nico, how many of these protesters are showing up at what was the name of the place again?
Rum Corner and Bar Vendetta. Bar Vendetta was the one that made the news, but those are two bars side by side, same owner.
Just looking that up because we here on the channel really love our maps, and so I
with
would
an
like
H,
to get
by the
a
way.
real. So here we are, where this is all happening, and near Dundas Street West.
Dundas Manning, close to Dundas and Manning.
And near Trinity Bellwoods Park. That's a perfect location.
Yes.
So, how many protesters were showing up at these bars in order to cause problems for the clientele there?
That day, and this was the 5th week of that campaign, it was 20 to 50 at their max. At their max. It was 20 to 50.
So you're saying that 20 to 50 people showed up at this location and were standing in front of it? Were they standing on the street or were they standing on the sidewalk?
Standing on the sidewalk patio. You know how the COVID measures are with bars these days.
Yeah.
On the sidewalk patio, stepping onto the patio, peeling people's masks off.
Now this is what really raises my eyebrows when you say it, Nico. So you're saying that these protesters, 20 to 50, between 20 to 50 people, were walking up to people and peeling masks off of them?
I saw that firsthand. And I chased that guy off and got in his face because these people are cowards. 20 to 50 lost to 4 guys. To 4 guys. And how that happened was the cops knew this was going down. This was the 5th week it was going down. I was belly to belly with somebody who was trying to exercise me, asking what my name is, demon, to kneel before him.
I think I might know who that is, the fellow that would do that.
Yeah. He's pretty well known in the anti-vax community here in Toronto. He carries a really big wooden cross.
Yeah, I've talked about him. Do you happen to know his name?
That would be John the Evangelist. That would... Yeah. So when that happened, cops arrived, jumped in between us, and separated us. But in the act of separating us, because we were standing on the west side of the bar patio, the cops pushed these harassers, I refuse to call them protesters, pushed the harassers to the east side of the patio, thus keeping the patio clear and letting the servers do their jobs. At that point, all we had to do was stand there for hours. We just stood by the tree with our arms crossed. We didn't make a fuss about it. A couple of times we would shout back, take a bath, little heckles, but the last thing we wanted to do was upset the customers.
So in your estimation, Nico, this movement, the thing that I am most curious about especially these anti-mask protesters, especially as we are beginning to see more and more that direct protest is happening throughout the election campaign, throughout people are showing up at Trudeau's campaign stops, throwing gravel at him, all of this sort of stuff. How much permeability do you think there is between this group and the groups that are also doing the harassment of Justin Trudeau's rallies?
It's the exact same people. I monitor these groups on Telegram, and yeah, I see the same names over and over again. It is the exact same people. These people do not believe in democracy. I hate Justin Trudeau too, but if you're going to do democracy, let your political opponent have their say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and certainly throwing rocks at them. Like, I mean, Justin Trudeau is still our elected prime minister, right? He's still the leader of our country.
Exactly. Like, yeah, I would love to have a civil discussion of why I think he's an idiot and not doing what needs to be done, but I'm not going to throw rocks at the dude. Like, come on, that's assault. That's.
So ultimately, Nico, how long did this standoff last between you and these protesters?
I didn't keep the time. It was dark when we left, and honestly, when we left, it was still there. They were still there.
Wow.
But yeah, it does feel demoralizing at that point.
Of course.
But the preconditions were already set. I'm just going to fast forward 1 second.
Okay.
The second week, we got the business owner, the customers, and the community on our side, which is
so. Nico, just to keep track of all this, what you have just described to us was week 1.
Yes, that was our week 1. That was their week 5.
How many weeks have you been doing this?
We beat them in 2 weeks.
Okay.
They'd been doing this for 5 weeks. We beat them in 2.
Okay. So I need to take a break for myself, Nico. So why don't you keep telling the people in the chat what happens in week 2?
Okay. Sorry. Before week 2 even happened, I like to scout the area. I like to scout the community and always know what the reality on the ground is at all times, or as often as I can. And my group didn't do this. This wasn't astroturfing. People from the community started putting up flyers saying, hey, counter protest at Bar Vendetta next week at this time. Those flyers were up there. They didn't come from the harassers. They did not come from my little group. That was the community doing it. I have to backtrack just 1 minute.
So it could be argued that you created a little inspiration moment for the community to see that, oh, these assholes, we don't need to put up with them.
Absolutely. All it takes is for one monkey to stand up. Sometimes that's all it takes. This case, 4 monkeys stood up. Before week 2 happened, on the Sunday after our week 1, their week 5, I actually visited the business owner. And I told her straight up, I know last night was scary. You see the intentions I have, and she did. If you do not want us to return next week, you're the only person who can stop us. Because this is your home. This is your house. I understand. And this business owner is, kind of a liberal. She wanted to go with the tactic of ignoring them.
Yes. As liberals do.
Yeah. As liberals do, and that's not how you defeat fascism.
Yeah.
That's not how you do it.
Well, and that goes into a question that I have for you, Nico. What would you say to someone who would say to you, "Oh, you're being a bit over dramatic, aren't you? You're being a bit overwrought. Sounds like you're doing like recon work and you're going into channels and spying and all of this. Don't you think that? What if they were to say to you, don't you think that's a bit childish, or do you think that that's a bit overwrought? What would your response to that be?"
I would ask that person to Google the intelligence process.
Just Google the intelligence process?
And there's this beautiful little graph. Not graph. It is a circle.
Are you talking about the intelligence cycle?
Yes. Are you familiar?
I'm looking right at it right now, bud.
Are you aware what that is?
I am not. And so this is actually a wonderful,
that is something I think we should all know about, because that is literally what every single intelligence agency in the world uses. MI5 uses it, CSIS uses it, the CIA uses it, whatever the KGB is called now uses it.
But okay, so and I feel like that's justified in terms of your methods. But what if they were to say, but these are just some idiot goons who are just kind of harassing and causing problems? Why can't we just ignore them? Won't the problem eventually just go away?
Because it won't go away. It encourages them. Doing this, harassing people, assaulting people, and getting away with it, emboldens them. And getting away with little crimes, like peeling someone's masks off, encourages them to get away with bigger crimes, right? Nobody just up and robs a bank one day. Nobody does that.
Well, and what you're saying, Nico, now is actually it is pushing into what I'm observing from the polling data that is coming out in regards to the People's Party of Canada. That as the protesters have kind of taken to the streets and are getting into Justin Trudeau's face, so too does the People's Party's numbers climb. Do you have any kind of insight or inside knowledge on the reaction from the People's Party or the anti-vax movement for the throwing of stones at Justin Trudeau? Have you seen anything about that?
I've seen their reactions. They are creaming themselves over that. They're saying, finally we're in the MSN, rah, 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 rah.
Right,
losing their minds. They're on cloud nine. They're literally jerking off.
Well, and they're excited about it because it broke into the news, right? So that you could see how simply the act of it being reported on and them making the news itself will only encourage further such activity.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be hurting their poll numbers. What do you make of that?
Fascists get off on the idea of that they're strong, like, and that everyone else is weak, but also overwhelming.
Yeah, that duality that fascists need, like an eternal threat that is constantly threatening them, that is also so weak that it can be pushed over.
Exactly. So back to what I was saying with my little visit to the business owner. I told her what my plan for week 2 was, because although we just said what happened with the gravel and how they're creaming themselves over, I want to get back to that, because there is also a lot of division within their ranks about that as well.
Oh, interesting.
I just don't want to be sidetracked. I told her what my plan for the second week was. The second week, I wasn't going to be going with everyone I could muster. I wasn't going to come in numbers. I was just going to go with one other person that I trust, that I know. And I spent the week fundraising. I raised $550 in funds. I went in a suit, the nicest suit I have, with $550 cash in my pocket. Sat down and bought drinks for all the customers. I know this sounds like it would be a very liberal way to counter protest, but I did that because she agreed to do what she could do, which was get it on CP24.
Right.
Which she did. And when that happened, John Tory came out and said, finally, John Tory and I actually agreed on something. He said, this is not a protest, this is harassment. In the same breath, he said, elected officials do not direct the police. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to tell James Raymer to do something about this. That's why I had the plan for week 2 that I did. Go in a suit, buy drinks for the customers, and still, flash that cash, chirp them a little bit, be like, hey, why'd you want to die poor? Just join Antifa, make those Soros bucks. So we weaponized the police. We demoralized them. There was actually an altercation among them that day on the second week. The cops did not allow these people onto the sidewalk patio. They did not allow them to bang pots and pans in the customers' ears. They did not allow them to assault people. They actually kept law and order on the second week. They did their jobs, what they should have been doing from the start.
Why is it, Nico? Why is it, do you think, that the police were not doing this initially?
There's an optimistic reason I have to that, and a cynical, more realistic reason.
Well, let's entertain both.
Okay. My optimistic reason would be that they would try to rationalize and say, oh, it looks really bad cracking down on protesters because then, it might turn into a Charter 2B type of thing, blah, 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 blah.
Right. They could say, I have the right to protest, and how dare you get in my way to protest, and all of this sort of stuff, sure.
Exactly. The other thing, which I think played the cynical reason, which I think played a much larger role, is police are kind of sympathetic, because police are generally right-wingers. They are, by the very nature of their work, authoritarians. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they don't really have a problem. They barricaded the HQ, the police HQ, on the 22nd, the day after Lamport Stadium.
That's right.
Was busted, was attacked, but they didn't have the actual south entrance. I mean, I'm talking about the south entrance to the HQ. Mm-hmm. They had that barricaded. They still have the museum and Discovery Center barricaded. When Chris Sky came out on September 2nd, known for causing riots in front of the HQ, no need for that. No need to barricade the south entrance. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're kind of sympathetic.
Yeah, and so, and also, it is possible. Like, let's we could play I will play devil's advocate in this conversation for just a moment, because you said that these protesters were doing this over a period of 5 weeks. How possible do you think it is that this has a kind of frog in the boiling water effect, where maybe the first protest that they had in front of this place was kind of calm and there weren't that many of them, and then steadily over the weeks it just trickled and became larger, and they became more aggressive, and the police were just sort of witnessing this happening, and it was never big enough to try to put a crackdown, and it just kind of steadily escalates. How much credibility do you think that argument would have?
I don't honestly know. I was not there.
Fair enough.
From weeks 1 to 4, I was there for weeks 5 and for week 6 with the suit. And by the way, on week 7, 0 of them showed up.
Very nice.
0.
So it's
0.
What it sounds to me, Nico, is it sounds as though you and a motley crew, a very small group of leftists, let's say. How do you identify, Nico?
I would self-describe as an anarchist, anarcho-syndicalist, but I do try to keep I do try to keep solidarity with all libertarian leftist causes. Fuck tankies, you're fascists with a red coat of paint.
When you say, hold on, what is a tanky?
That is an authoritarian who adopts the rhetoric of the left.
Okay.
Nosballs.
Okay. Yeah, under that, I've heard tanky used for lots of different things. I myself get called a tanky fairly regularly, and so I just wanted to clarify your position. Yeah, the nosballs, the guys that are trying to align the communist and the fascist movement into one movement. I know what you're referring to there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I think that we should be standing in solidarity with one another. That historically there's this odd separation between anarchists and communists, and also between like Trotskyists and Stalinists and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't see any of that as very useful for what we're attempting to do. And so the narrative that's coming out.
This isn't Franco's Spain. Sorry, I was just saying, this isn't Franco's Spain right now. We can't afford to, when you finally get your way and you can make a classless, stateless, moneyless society, that's when I'll be like, sorry, I think there's a few more unjust hierarchies we can abolish. Can we do that, guys?
Certainly.
But we are a long way away from that. Let's start simple.
Yeah.
Let's get into social democracy, and then maybe we can try socialism.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be a transition no matter how you slice it.
Yes.
So the story, Nico, as I understand it, is that you and this small group of anarchists, self-described anarcho syndicalists, I should say.
I don't think the other guys there would describe themselves as anarchists.
Very good, Nico. But you yourself, right? So you gather these gentlemen together, and in a very short period of time, you by simply standing up to these anti-maskers and these people harassing people on the streets, and getting into and witnessing them get into physical altercations with people, in very short order. You're able to chase them off with small numbers. There's 4 of you, and you're saying there's between 20 to 50 of them.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're able to do that simply by communicating with the leadership, like communicating with the business owner, communicating with the police, and making it very clear to all parties that you're going to continue showing up as a counter-protest.
Yes. And these people are cowards. The way you beat fascists is the same way you beat a schoolyard bully. if you ignore, or whoever told you just ignore the bully and they'll leave you alone gave you really bad advice as a child. That's the worst advice. A schoolyard bully is beaten when not just one person stands up to them. They'll get beaten back. When 2, 3, 4 people stand up to that schoolyard bully, no matter how big he is, bullies are pussies. Bullies are cowards.
Well,
and that's why I wanted to come on to this podcast, because I want to get this message out there, and this happened here in Toronto. I don't know where all your
we're all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. But you know what? This is happening all over the place. I want to talk directly to the listeners. Wherever you are, whatever town, city, hamlet you're in, the anti-vaxxers are targeting a business very much like this, very much in this way. And it does not take much to knock them off. I drink at Bar Vendetta for free now, which I love because they make the fucking perfect Negroni. I can go down there tonight and have a free Negroni if I want. So just be the monkey that stands up. Just be the monkey that stands up.
Well, Nico, with those words, I think I'm going to close this interview down. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us your story. And thank you so much for that inspiring message and inspiring words. Keep up the good work, Nico. I look forward to hearing more of your exploits.
And can I say one more thing before I'm done?
Of course.
Trans rights.
Trans rights.
Hell yes.
You got it, bud.
Thank
you for being here, Nico. I don't know how to... If you could let yourself out of the room, that would be really wonderful. Thank you, bud. Thank you so much. Yes, what a great opportunity, what a great thing to have Nico on here. I have to obviously figure out how to do this a little bit better, get the technical aspect of it aside. I hope you guys liked that. I hope that was good. I know you just said that you like that, Crouching. But I think it is important that we have the citizens who are actually doing this work and actually taking to the streets and actually coming out come on and discuss it. And my concern, and the big reason I wanted to have Nico on, is that these sorts of right-wing movements begin in a kind of innocuous sort of way, right? That you can sort of shrug and say to yourself, oh, they're just, a bunch of ruffians, or they're just a bunch of, like, rabble-rousers, or they're just a bunch of, oh, this is just, like, anxiety, and people are just shaking it out and all of this kind of stuff. But this is how these movements start. This is how these movements begin. That what we are witnessing throughout the United States, especially with movements like the Proud Boys, right? Movements that are explicitly white supremacist, that are explicitly neo-fascist, who are explicitly going around the streets and causing problems and harassing citizens and assaulting people with force and violence while wearing body armor and shit like this. Well, those movements start somewhere, and they start with these anti-mask movements. They start with groups like 20 to 50 people going and standing in front of a restaurant and causing problems. Well, if you have 20 people standing in front of a restaurant and then 3 or 4 of them discover that they have a more extremist inclination, then that's how they get together. And it's gentlemen like Nico who are grabbing some friends and going around and causing problems and disrupting these sorts of things and disrupting these organizations from happening, while also simultaneously doing some very good internal journalistic work. And while simultaneously, and I can't help but have a little chuckle when I say it, and when he said, well, this is the cycle of intelligence, but if our enemies are using this tool, then so should we. Then so should we. That if this is the way that the CIA and the FBI are doing things, then it isn't silly that we also follow this method. And so thank you for that information. That's actually, and that's exactly right. Planning, direction, needs, requirements. Go out and collect it, process it, exploitation, analysis, dissemination. And of course, it'll go through all of these. I'm very interested in this now. That's a very, very, very fun piece. And of course, it's okay to question the government. Like that's never that's not up for debate. I think it's always okay to question the government. But the concern, especially with the People's Party, is that we are seeing an explicitly far-right movement, one that considers the Conservative Party to be not right-wing enough, rising up. It's comprised, and you can see it when you go in, you see Canada First, right? And you go and you see who are these People's Party candidates talking to. They are young, white men. You know, the most reasonable people in the society, right? Always the young white men are always the most reasonable people in your society, right? That's what history has taught us. And if these far-right groups are beginning to organize here in Canada and beginning to gain traction, as we are seeing them rise in the polls, we have to confront them. We have to be very concerned about them. And I am absolutely going to platform the people who are doing that work. PPC is nothing to joke about. They're growing. I'd give it 3 more election cycles before they surpass the NDP in polling. Well, we can't be predictive like that. The hope, though, is that such an organization would plateau. Much that you see with like, say, the Greens or even the Bloc, right? That they find their niche and they sort of plateau there. And PPC is nothing to joke about, though. You're right about that. And then Mark says, the United States is going to look like interwar Spain. That's a very specific interwar Spain. That's an interesting reference, but I'm going to take a look at that. Yeah, the Spanish Civil War. How would I find out about these anti-vaxxers harassing my local businesses before they do it? I think that probably the best way of finding out about that kind of thing, like if you wanted to become one of these internal spy types, I suspect the best way to do it would be to go to a rally and just start chatting people up and get on their, collect the data, get on their apps, find out where they are, right? And become just like an internal agent, right? Become the double agent, figure it out. I definitely blew myself up. I could not do that. I think if I showed up at any of these rallies now, they know who I am. I was very upfront with them about who I am. And so I would not be good at doing this, I think. But I think I could be good at dissemination, at getting the information into the atmosphere. Because we are going to have to create a countervalence to this energy, right? That the current parties are not really doing, and our media is not doing what needs to be done, right? They're not taking these guys seriously. They're not seeing the signs. They're not actually paying attention to how serious this political movement actually is. And should it continue to ascend in the way that it is ascending currently, like at the beginning of this election cycle, There was no one was saying that it was possible that these guys were going to get a seat in Parliament, and now they're polling higher than the Greens, right? Now they're polling higher than the Greens, and they have been for a while now. This is a significant threat. We need to treat it that way, that it needs to be treated as a significant threat. Our media is not. They are not talking about white supremacy. They are not talking about white supremacists within the Conservative Party. They are not talking about fascist movements. They are not talking about fascist movements even as it relates to the United States. And we're not really delving very deeply into, like, we have CSIS saying very explicitly, we have CSIS saying that there are white supremacist movements, that online white supremacy is more prolific here in Canada than in the United States. And that's CSIS that is saying that kind of stuff. And the idea that it is not going to manifest itself into our political lives and into our political reality, I think, is just another type of delusion making. And so this is something I no longer feel like we can simply shrug at the PPC. I think that we need to begin talking about the PPC as a genuine threat, as something to be taken seriously, that someone like Maxime Bernier is not a clownish, buffoonish figure, that he is a very specific, what he is doing is intentional. He is intending to move Canada further to the right, and he is doing it on purpose. And I don't think we can continue kind of shrugging and giggling in regards to Maxime Bernier. And if we continue doing that, then when it comes time to actually confront, we won't be prepared. So we should start that now, and we should start taking these people like Tyler L. Russell, the leader of Canada First, we should take seriously now. Because they're on YouTube just like I'm on YouTube, and they're proliferating their garbage just like I'm proliferating my beautifully cultivated art. But we need to be prepared for a confrontation, and we need to begin that preparation now. There's a video shows vaccine protesters calling BC RCMP officers Nazis and brown shirts. Yeah, I mean, like, these guys are anti-vaxxers, so they're not going to be rooted in reality, right? If vaccine wasn't politicized by corrupt government, and if it was left for Canadians to decide for themselves to be vaccinated or not, people wouldn't have been taken to the street with this level of anger, right? That's why I'm very worried about the cons winning. F that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I am a little bit looser with the Conservatives, because while the Conservatives have sort of been nodding and winking at these white supremacist groups, the white supremacist groups themselves are not that thrilled about the Conservatives. So there's at least that. That the white supremacist groups like Canada First, like the Proud Boys, right? They themselves are not that pleased with the Conservative Party. That they openly mock Aaron O'Toole, right? That they call him a liberal, right? Because, how dare, a governor want to actually govern, right? And I mean, for goodness sakes, like, protesters calling RCMP officers Nazis and brown shirts, like, I mean, that's just a level of illiteracy that is, and the illiteracy is real. Like, the illiteracy is real. Like, I mean, I don't just want, like, I do want to make fun of these guys as much as I can, but I don't want to say that just to try to dismiss them or try to belittle them or any of that kind of stuff. But, like, these guys don't know what communism is. Like, they don't know they don't really understand the class struggle, right? Like, these guys are if you actually listen to what they're saying, they really are these anarcho capitalists, right? That video we were watching earlier, they really are walking around saying, like, yeah, we can just create an anarcho capitalist system, or we can just subserviate ourselves to corporations more effectively. Like, what is get a job except a statement of, well, why don't you just sell yourself to an oligarchy more efficiently? Right? Why don't you sell yourself into wage slavery, into a neo-feudal structure more effectively? right? And like, yeah, I mean, illiterate sociopaths. You definitely have some of that going on, right? But Andrew, and I do think it goes the other direction too, which is to say, like, they're all illiterate. That's certainly the truth. But I do think that there are people in that movement. Like, there was one fellow, I believe his name was Michael Frazier, if I'm not mistaken. I listened to him speak at the PPC, at the Canada First convention that they held, and he was very persuasive. He was very persuasive, and he was very effective, and he was very genuine, and he was very concerned, much in the way that I am concerned, right? And I could really tell that if I were to speak with him, that he and I would have more in common than not. I think that that's true. But ultimately, his position is one of white supremacy, that he wants to see unity occur under the banner of white supremacy. That why can't everyone get along as long as the whites are in charge, right? Like that kind of thinking and that kind of speaking, that for men like Michael Frazier, I believe that's his name, but for men like this gentleman, that's certainly not the way they think about it, right? That might be the reality of what they are saying, but that they would probably be quite insulted by that insinuation that that is what they are seeking to do. Good to see you, pissed off Canadian. Oh, before you go, bud, what was the name of that disorder that someone vaping can get? We were talking about it earlier, and I couldn't think of the name of it. It starts with an E, I'm sure of it. I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society closed. Until next time, pleasant dreams, everyone. That's so funny, dude. That's so funny. No, it's popcorn lung might be the colloquial. Division is a dangerous road. Yeah, because it will never stop dividing once it begins. Yeah, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Okay, guys. I think this is the end of this one. I'd say that interview was successful. That really spawned an interesting conversation and got a really interesting viewpoint. I'm going to try to get more people in to have more conversations like that. Got to work on the technical details of it, but such is life. Such is life. All right, guys. Always remember, each and every one of you is a divine being standing in divine energy. These billionaires spend hundreds of billions of dollars to convince you that something else is going on. Don't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.